That song
Yeah,
is amazing. It's an Egyptian song, and like basically Africans, North Africans especially, they have this thing with music. So
yeah.
it's just thing
Welcome,
we have.
welcome, welcome. Yeah, welcome, Leila. We're live, guys. I have an interesting guest today, guys. Her name is Leila. Leila is a war reporter, MENA, and she's an expert in, MENA politics, Middle East and North Africa. She's very, very smart. And if you're just joining, you're welcome, guys. It's going to be an interesting section today. This is the first one, so yeah, there's a bit of nerve here and there, but again, today's conversation with Leila is going to be interesting. And yeah, we'll start from you, Leila. Please introduce yourself to the audience and then we can continue with the conversation.
Sure. My name is Leilah Hatoum, and I'm not a belly dancer, though I like to promote myself as a belly dancer every single time somebody asks me what you do. I've been doing journalism for only a quarter century, like 25 years, since I was in university. I have a master's degree in international law, emphasis on humanitarian laws. I never thought that this degree would actually help me out much, but it did, especially during war times. I've been covering wars since basically 2004 until now. The Israeli aggressions, the assassinations that happened in Lebanon back then until now, I've been covering them. I also basically covered economic affairs. That's the financial policies of governments for nearly 15 years when I lived in the GCC, the Gulf Cooperation Council states. And I basically, from there, I was introduced to an international audience as well when I worked with international media like Wall Street Journal, Dow Jones Newswires. I was the editor for Newsweek Middle East. I was attacked by the Israelis in 2016 for a full year. They made me like it. I was their cause. They would wake up and say like, we're going to attack her today for a whole year. So all of that added to the experience until we reached this current war. And I had opted to come back to Lebanon from the GCC. I've been in Lebanon since November 2022. I did not leave at all. And I moved my residency back to my homeland. And I was covering the war since day one on the front lines in South Lebanon.
All right. And you are from Lebanon. And yeah, it's interesting to have this conversation with you. So I want to begin by asking you this question about Lebanon. Since you're from Lebanon and you know a lot about the region, in recent times, we've seen the Israelis, exerting their power in the region. And one particular case is Lebanon. What is the next step for Lebanon after the whole war with Hezbollah and still with Israeli troops on Lebanese territory? What is the political situation in Lebanon?
Well, at the moment, we have basically an impasse. There's a major divide between various Lebanese political parties and their supporters. The Israelis made sure to create this kind of sedition and division inside the Lebanese state. You have to understand, we haven't finished with the war. The war is not over yet between Lebanon and the Israeli entity. Israel continues to occupy Lebanese territories in South Lebanon and basically southeast of Lebanon as well. And the Israelis continue to aggress the Lebanese on a daily basis. Yesterday, they carried out dozens of what you call airstrikes, and that left basically one person martyred, dozens of people who got injured. All of them are civilians, none of them are fighters, and the Israelis are not stopping at all. For the time being, the Americans were trying to pressure the Lebanese to agree to disarm the resistance in Lebanon. And the Lebanese basically amended the American paper in which basically they said, if we are going to disarm anybody outside the scope of the government powers, what we need to do is basically we need to see the Israelis stop their aggression. That's the first priority. The second one is basically see the Israelis withdraw from all Lebanese territories. Then the Lebanese government will have basically the ability to spread its authority across all Lebanese territories and strengthen the army in order to do what you call disarm all armed factions outside the state scope, and that includes the resistance. They didn't say resistance, they said Hezbollah. The funny part is that Hezbollah is not the only resistance in Lebanon. We have multiple resistance factions, including Amal movement, including the Communist Party, the SSMP, and others who fight under one umbrella. But because the Israelis see Hezbollah as the only or one or the main danger to them in terms of like the training, the strategic arms that they have, they want to disarm Hezbollah. That's why the Americans they sleep and wake up saying Hezbollah, Hezbollah, Hezbollah all the time. For the Israelis, it's Hezbollah, Hezbollah, Hezbollah. So currently we have an impasse because some of the Lebanese are right-wing groups who used to be friends with the Israelis during the civil war. The Israeli entity had armed them and trained them throughout in the 1970s and 1980s. And those people basically are now pushing towards the disarmament of Hezbollah. And they're doing the job that the Israelis were not able to do, which is create internal pressure towards the disarmament of the resistance. Luckily, the majority or the bulk of the Lebanese population, the other part, is against disarming the resistance so long that there's an occupation, so long that there's an aggression, and so long that the Israelis say that the greater Israel basically includes all of Lebanon. So there's always a threat from the Israeli side. So this is the situation at the moment.
Yeah, so the pressure that Israel is putting is not just on Hezbollah, but also on the government to force the disarming of Hezbollah. But how does that help the Lebanese state? Is it for the best interest of Lebanon, or is it political actors within Lebanon trying to use that as well to muscle other opponents like Hezbollah and Amal and the other groups you mentioned? But why Hezbollah? Like you said, there are other groups and factions within the state. Is it because of the ideology? Is it because of the links to Iran? Why Hezbollah? And is it in the best interest of the Lebanese state?
Well, the thing is, so long that you have an occupation that continues to threaten you and openly says that it wants all of the Lebanese territories as part of Greater Israel, it's never in the Lebanese government's or state's basically interest to disarm its resistance on the ground. You need what you call a backbone that supports the army at any point, because the Lebanese army is very weak in terms of, it's poor, not weak, it's poor in terms of strategic arms. It's not allowed to have strategic arms. And that's by an international decision that was made by the Americans, the French, the Germans, and the British, who, whenever the Lebanese army at any point would acquire something that's strategic, they would ban it from actually acquiring it. I'll give you an example. In 2009, the Russians actually offered Lebanon 10 brand new fighter jets for free as an offer, with 5 years maintenance for free and training. If we had those fighter jets, it would have changed part of the narrative, because we would our pilots are one of the top pilots in the world. They go and train in the US, they train everywhere, and they come in first in terms of all the pilots who go around basically to the US or other countries and train over there. So we don't have fighter jets. What we have is like basically 8 Super Tucano basically I'm going to call them birds because they're very peaceful. They can only engage at a certain distance and at a very, very what you call low speed. They are no match to the F-16s, F-18s, F-35s at any point. And basically, they don't have all the strategic missiles that are supposed to be mounted on them because the Americans don't allow us. So at the end of the day, we don't have an air force. We have few helicopters from the Soviet Union era, very, very old ones. And that's it. So when you look at the whole situation, we don't have an air force. We don't have air defense systems. We don't have what you call long-range missiles or medium-range missiles at any point. What we have is short-range missiles. So the army is trained in Lebanon to fight street fights or guerrilla warfare. And this is its strength. It doesn't fight like a traditional army. So it can easily take out the Israelis if they invade Lebanon. But the problem is with the strategic weapons, the Israelis are advanced technologically. They have the best technology in the world because 57 states and the NATO states give them that technology. They have all the weapons and strategic weapons in the world. And they know that if the Lebanese army gets this kind of armament, it will beat them. So that's why the Israelis had pressured the international community to ban the Lebanese army from having strategic weapons. Whereas Hezbollah, for example, it has long-range missiles. I know from 2006, when I covered the Israeli aggression on Lebanon back in July 2006 and July and August, I remember very clearly that Hezbollah had what you call the 400-kilometer range missiles. And they had basically medium-range missiles as well. So they could easily reach what you call beyond Tel Aviv and beyond Haifa, all the way down to, for example, Eilat, Rashrash, to the southernmost part of the Israeli entity, and even beyond. And remember, during the beginning of this war on Lebanon in 2023, the Cypriots were giving what you call aid to the Israelis, and Hezbollah and the Lebanese resistance threatened Cyprus. If you continue to support the Israelis, we're going to target you and any entity that supports the Israelis. And that's when the Cypriots actually backed off, because they know that Hezbollah has this kind of missiles that can actually reach Cyprus. I believe it was the Cypriot president who came out and said, we're not taking part in this war and we're neutral. Having said that, the Israelis want to disarm Hezbollah and the Americans want to disarm Hezbollah to safeguard the Israeli occupation in terms of the next invasion of Lebanon. Remember, the Israelis have invaded Lebanon 3 times in the past. The first time was the 1967 war, which Lebanon had no hand in it. And people claim that basically, no, Lebanon was part of the Arab states attacking Israel. No. Israel had a fight with 3 Arab states, Syria, Egypt, and Jordan. And Miko Pelet's own father, who he was a general in the Israeli army, he said Lebanon had no hand in this war, but we attacked it because they wanted to take parts of South Lebanon. The second invasion happened in 1978, after which the international community established UNIFIL, United Nations Interim Forces in South Lebanon, which were
Yeah.
supposed to be what you call a buffer zone between us and the Israelis, but they stayed inside Lebanese territories rather than the Israeli side or the occupied Palestinian side. And there is always friction between them and the civilians, depending on how they act on the ground. And in 1982, again, the Israelis invaded Lebanon, despite the fact that the US had given assurances to Lebanon 4 months beforehand through its envoy at that time, Philip Habib, that the Israelis are not going to invade Lebanon. 4 months later, the Israelis invaded Lebanon, and that was in June 2000 and June 1982. So with this kind of history repeating itself with this enemy, disarming the resistance becomes something that's stupid and not strategic enough. The army understands that very well. There is somebody inside the government who belongs to the right-wing groups who is trying to push along with the Americans and the Israelis towards the disarmament of the resistance. I think it's going to take time. It will cause some friction, but I have assurances within the army and the resistance that there's not going to be any pitting of one against the other. So even if the government tries to actually pit the army versus the resistance, it's not going to happen.
Yeah, speaking of that, before we move to the next question, I saw a high-level delegation from Iran recently that came into Beirut. No other government official met them except representatives from Hezbollah. And
No,
during the course of
that's not
this
true.
meeting,
That
no,
they
no,
actually met with the parliament speaker.
the-
The first parliament speaker is the second, it's like considered the second president in Lebanon.
okay. So the Speaker of Parliament is he, from Amal, or is he from Hezbollah? Is he from
He
the
is the
group?
leader of Amal movement. So he's basically
Exactly.
the second, one of the factions that are resistance on the ground.
Yeah, basically, so allies of Iran. That's what I mean. So
Okay, allies of,
because
yeah, it's Axis, yeah, true.
yeah, it's the assets exactly because I know the other side refused to meet with them. The president, the prime minister, and any other person from the other factions refused to
The
meet with
president
them.
actually met with Larijani. And the prime minister met with Larijani, and they actually walked by hand in hand. Is the only person who actually refused to meet with Ali Larijani, who is the envoy of Ali Khamenei, the supreme commander of Iran, was the foreign affairs minister. And there's a really funny story. This is gossip. Seriously, this is gossip. Okay, so Ali
Okay.
Larijani comes to Lebanon on the same day that Tom Barak and basically the U.S. Delegation was supposed to come to Lebanon. They delayed until the day after. So they came after him. So Ali Larijani comes to Lebanon and he meets with the parliament speaker. He meets with the president, where the president told him, we refuse any intervention in Lebanese affairs, including from the Iranians. He met with the prime minister of Lebanon, where basically Ali Larijani said, we're here to help you with whatever you want, and we're not going to interfere in your internal affairs. And they walked away, like out in front of the cameras, holding like each other's hand, like side by side. And it looked like they were lovers, but they're not, of course. I mean, our prime minister doesn't like them. And then he
Yeah.
met with the parliament speaker, during which the reporters asked him, are you going to meet with the foreign affairs minister of Lebanon? And the foreign affairs minister of Lebanon belongs to the right-wing group that was buddies with the Israelis during the civil war. That's the Lebanese forces. We call them the Quwat, Quwat al-Lebaniyya.
What?
And yeah, Quwat, Lebanese forces, Al-Af for short.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think outside Lebanon we call them, we know them as the Phalanges. Is that the same group?
no, the Phalangists are basically the mother of the Al-Af. The Al-Af was what you call the military wing of the Phalangists. And
Okay.
they dissociated
What?
themselves from the Phalangists, and they became a political party of their own. They fought against, like they had skirmishes against each other at one point in time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. And
the fun,
I even know that some Christian groups as well fought against them, including the former president Michel Aoun. I think
true.
whose son is in power now, I guess.
No,
Is
no,
that the
no,
son?
no.
Is that the son or the brother?
No. The current president Joseph Aoun has the same family name, but it's a different family and different
Oh, so
area. Different
it's
area.
not, it's not related.
No. Both are former army commanders. Both have the last name Aoun, but each one comes from a different area. So
Oh, okay.
yeah,
Interesting.
and they're not related. So the funny part is that a reporter asks Larijani, will you be meeting with this foreign affairs minister who continues to attack Iran? And he basically keeps what you call calling in the Iranian ambassador in Lebanon every other time for questioning, which is really stupid, by the way. So the Ali Rajani said, like, I have a really tight schedule and I've met with the presidents, and I do believe basically in the future, if we have time, we will be meeting with other people, like in next visits. He was being very diplomatic. He didn't want to meet with them, but he was being very diplomatic. So that same reporter went over and asked the foreign affairs minister, will you be meeting with Ali Rajani? And like, guess what his answer was? Like a kindergarten child. He's like, even if I had time, I will not be meeting with Ali Rajani. It's like, nobody asked you to meet with him. Ali Rajani didn't want to meet with you, and he didn't ask for that, basically that appointment. So he sounded really stupid on this one. But it's like, this is the kind of officials we have in the government who are trying to push for the disarmament of the resistance.
Yeah, but what is Israel's real goal in Lebanon? Is it territorial gains? Is it strategic, strategic control? Is it, some people say they, creating a security corridor? Is it control over Lebanon? And then you have other players in the region as well, like France, who are claimed to be a traditional, player in the Eastern Med, who have interest in the Eastern Med. Why are the French not doing anything? Just sitting down there like dogs and allowing the Israelis to run rampage in the region without any sort of control or pushback whatsoever. So, what is Israel's real goal in the region? And what is France doing? What the hell is France doing just sitting down there like that? Because at the end of the day, if the Israelis continue to push, they will be the main players, in Lebanese politics and not France.
Okay, so the Israelis have always said it openly, and Netanyahu just said it basically about 4 days ago, that they want all of Lebanon. So it's territorial gains, but it's not only territorial. They also want to take over what you call the abundance of wealth in the region. The region is sitting on what you call one of the largest
Gas.
natural gas fields in offshore. And the offshore, basically, what you call coast of Lebanon, it's shallow waters. It's not that deep. So it doesn't take that much time to drill, and it doesn't give you problems or any hiccups when it comes to drilling. So it costs less to extract basically gas from there. Same thing goes for Syria, same thing goes for Palestine. So the Israelis want to control the whole coastline of the Eastern Mediterranean region for the abundance of wealth over there, for the geostrategic position of it. I mean, like, think about it from a financial perspective, because every single war out there is not only basically just to show off, it's to take over resources and for money. Money and control. Who controls the trade routes and the energy routes controls the decision-making process across basically the globe. So the trade corridor from India all the way to Europe passes through the Eastern Mediterranean. Again, that's Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and Egypt. Anything, I'm not going to say basically Israel, because I don't believe that the Israeli entity is a real land. It's it's a fictional state. Until it has fixed borders, it's not considered a state under international law. So looking at the situation, the Silk Route passes from there. The energy pipelines, which is the American, what you call, project that extends from the GCC through Eastern Mediterranean to Cyprus and Greece, passes through the Eastern Mediterranean. Same thing for what you call the Russian pipelines that goes from east to west. And all of those intertwine in our region. So whoever controls that region controls anything that goes back and forth and will make a killing. That's why the Chinese, basically, for example, run the port of Haifa, which is owned by the Indians, which the Israelis sold it to them, but it actually belongs to the Palestinians. I mean, it's really funny. And this is why you find the Chinese, the Americans, the Russians, and the French, the Germans, and the British are fighting over this region. Now, why is France basically trying to get a foothold over here? It used to be the mandate power over Syria and Lebanon. It considers them historically a Francophone country that belongs to it. When the Russians and the Americans are fighting over this region, it needs a piece of the pie, because it lost certain interests in Africa. If you remember what happened in Congo, Senegal, among other places, I mean, the French extension got what you call clippings of its wings by the Africans, by the Russians who were moving the Africans at one point. And I'm not saying a certain nationality, because it's multiple nations, including the Sahel state and North Africa as well. So when you look at the whole matter, the French are looking for substitutes for their energy needs, and substitute in terms of what you call securing their trade routes from the east to west. So the best thing is to control ports in the Eastern Mediterranean. What did they do? They recently acquired 2 ports in Lebanon, one in Beirut and one in Tripoli. You have a French company, CGM, which is owned by a French Lebanese guy who now runs the port of Beirut. and it runs the port of Tripoli in Lebanon. And it also basically it's negotiating with the what you call the Syrians to run one of the ports or several ports in Syria as well. So by securing that, they will secure at least a foothold in terms of that international trade that passes from there, and they will have a piece of the pie without having to fight at any point. I'm sorry, that's my dog over here.
No
I think his
problem.
girlfriend on the fourth floor basically is just skipping
Okay.
out, so he calls her. I'm sorry about
Yeah,
that.
no problem.
So that's the French and their interest in this region. Aside from that, the French also, the French president has lost so much respect on the ground. He has barely any credibility. He wants to show his people that he can still basically be in control, that he's the new Napoleon or something like that. So he needs to be playing with the big guys over here in the region, and nobody's giving him weight, I mean, at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, having said that, like I said, I mentioned the French. Another country again is Turkey, who's also looking, and pushing people around for their own interest in the region. So, who's the real big dog in the region? Who's the real player in the region? Who controls the balance of power in the Middle East?
I will be answering that, but somebody said so much information. Guys, I'm really sorry. I live in details. So sometimes I try to give all the details so you'd understand the players and the game in this whole region and beyond, because everything is intertwined and everything goes back to controlling again the finances, trade routes, and geostrategic position that secures all of that. So the main players in this region for this year, drums roll, you have it's the fight between the Americans and the Russians, and all the minions underneath them are the secondary players who appear to be the main players. So I'll give you an example. Secondary players that appear as main players are the Israelis. The Israelis are capping on the Russian-American conflict over here, and they're actually securing what they need to secure while everybody's fighting. The American-Iranian fight, the Israelis take basically they what you call cap on that to eliminate or weaken their enemies and expand their territories. So they're taking advantage of those fights the Americans have in the region. Why did I say the Americans and the Russians? Because the Russians had a major military base in the Eastern Mediterranean region in Syria. Base Hamimim, it's called Hamimim. And the
Is it
problem
the
is
one in
that the Americans had, yes,
Tartus?
exactly.
Is it the one in Tartus or Hamaim
It's
base?
in, I
Yeah.
think,
Is it
Hamimim base.
Latakia?
So the whole idea, sorry, yeah. So again, towards the end of it, the Americans had zero military bases in the region. There was an espionage base, or still an espionage base for the British in Cyprus, the Cypriot base over there. The Americans sometimes use it for their air force. And there's basically the Israeli entity, but the Israeli entity does not do the bidding of the US all the time. What the Americans want is their own military base, or to at least kick out the Russians from the area so they can control the resources. And how do we know that? Back in 2019, I wrote an article in November 2019. And in that article, I said that Jeffrey Feltman, the former US ambassador to Lebanon, stood in front of the Congress in May 2019. And he actually told the Congress, we need to control the resources in the Eastern Mediterranean region. Otherwise, Moscow will beat what you call Washington to that.
Yeah,
Do you
sorry,
understand?
you have to take that again because my internet has been lagging, so I had to switch in between, but it's fine now.
No, no
So
worries, no
you
worries.
have to take that
So
part again. Yeah.
okay, so in 2019, May 2019, Jeffrey Feltman, who used to be the former American ambassador to Lebanon, the guy who was responsible for the Horn of Africa file, the guy who was basically the advisor for Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State for Minor Asia and for Middle Eastern affairs, Near Eastern affairs, he actually stood in front of the Congress and told the Congress in May 2019 that we need to control the energy resources in the Eastern Mediterranean. Otherwise, Moscow will beat Washington to it. And I wrote an article in November 2019 in Arabic, and it ran on the website of what you call Sky News Arabia, okay, in Arabic. And I still have that basically, that article. I display it every now and then. It says, just was like somebody's basically having a wedding next to us. It sounds like shooting, but it's not. I'm in Beirut talking
Yeah,
to you today.
yeah. It's we can't really hear it, so you're fine.
Okay, fair enough. So basically, I wrote an article in November 2019 saying, if the Americans are looking towards controlling the Eastern Mediterranean region, then that will set what you call a spark for a new war over there to control the resources and the routes over there. And then we saw what you call Egypt inviting the United Arab Emirates to be a non-voting member of the Eastern Mediterranean gas exporters. I mean, the UAE is in the GCC. It's like thousands and hundreds of miles away from the Mediterranean. So it has nothing to do. I mean, if you look at the UAE exactly, it's down there, like in the center, right? And for it to go in one line, for example, to Egypt, where you have the Sinai, which is the triangle right underneath the word Israel, it's way
Yeah.
away from the Mediterranean. The Mediterranean starts from where the Israel, like the word Israel says, and all the way, like you get to see it. The Mediterranean is right above Egypt, Libya, Algeria, and from above there's Turkey, Syria. Okay, so you get to see it, right? That's the Mediterranean. UAE, if United Arab Emirates, if you actually zoom out, it's way down, it's way away. So why would Egypt invite the United Arab Emirates to be a non-voting member of the East Mediterranean, gas exporters? It's not part of that, non-voting member. So they were setting what you call the tone beforehand, years before, for that alliance of the energy pipelines that go from east to west through the Eastern Mediterranean to Cyprus, and from Cyprus basically all the way to Greece. So you get to see
So,
Cyprus.
so this is Cyprus. It
Yes.
goes all the way to Greece.
Greece, right? Like, no, down. Yeah. You get to see Greece now, right? So they
This,
bypassed Turkey. What did Turkey do at that time, if you remember? Turkey announced that its economic and territorial waters and economic waters extend all the way to the southern Mediterranean to Libya. What does that mean? So it's from Turkey, where you say Anatolia, for example, and scroll a little
yes.
bit down or zoom out a little bit, all the way to Libya, next to Egypt. So if all the
Yeah.
economic waters between Turkey and Libya belong to Turkey, then any pipeline that passes from the Israeli side and Egypt to Cyprus and from Cyprus to Greece will have to pass through the waters of Turkey. And
Yeah.
that set
And
up
one,
the next fight as well, because Turkey
yeah,
on
and
top
one quick
of
one.
yeah,
Yeah, and one quick one before you continue because you're putting out a lot of information.
sorry.
Does this explain why Turkey supported the government in Tripoli to go against renegade General Khalifa Haftar in Libya? Because the French are supporting Khalifa Haftar, and then Turkey, if you remember during the war, they sent in a lot of drones and sent personnel to Tripoli to support the government in
They also
Tobruk.
sent mercenaries
Yeah, a
from
lot of
Syria.
mercenaries.
From
Yeah.
Syria. Okay, so it's one, in one part, the reason why Turkey took part in that war and supported the government that the United Nations back against Haftar, whom the United Arab Emirates back. The main fighting is actually between the Muslim Brotherhood and the GCC states. So the United Arab Emirates was supporting General Haftar because he was fighting against the Muslim Brotherhood, who supported the government. And Turkey at that time and until today basically is what you call a pro-Muslim Brotherhood and is Muslim Brotherhood. Erdogan is Muslim Brotherhood at the end of the day. So he wanted to support anybody who is fighting against the Emiratis and at the same time who is pro-Muslim Brotherhood. So that's why basically Turkey took part in that fight. It's not only to control resources, but also petty grievances between Turkey and the UAE. Also what you call strategic fight between the Muslim Brotherhood and the GCC states. And that's why we saw the UAE
Back,
take part in that fight with their warplanes bombarding
yeah.
in Libya.
Back up a little bit. Here's what I don't understand.
Sorry.
In Syria, they seem to have aligning interest because maybe to a lesser extent to the UAE, but most of these countries teamed up together, supported groups like Ahrar al-Sham, which I know very well. The leader Hassan Aboud at that time was traveling frequently to Qatar. Qatar is a different country from the UAE, but
Of
I know that
course.
the UAE also had like a different interest in Syria. So the Turkey, so they have aligning interest in Syria, but when it comes to Libya, they're bombing each other. Make sense.
Well, let me make okay. So this is really funny. There's an interview on YouTube with the former Prime Minister of Qatar, okay? And the former Prime Minister of Qatar, Jassim bin Hamad, and Hamad bin Jassim, sorry, Hamad bin Jassim. And he said, he actually confessed live on TV, on YouTube, that they had set up what you call an observation room or an operations room in Jordan since the beginning of the fight in Syria, since 2011, and they had supported it with hundreds of billions of dollars, okay, to topple the Assad regime. Now, the funny part is that the GCC nations had a vendetta, not all of them, but mainly Saudi Arabia, UAE, Qatar at one point. they hated the Assad regime because it never told them yes. Assad, I mean, no, if you like him or not, at the end of the day, you have to say facts as they are. He was not pro GCC policies, and the GCC basically at one point were acting like the newly rich kid. I can throw my money and I can buy anybody. And he was basically, and they were trying to normalize ties with the Israelis. So Assad at that time refused to normalize ties with the Israelis, refused to say yes to the GCC. He was already self-sufficient, so he didn't need their money. Syria at that time had zero international debt. So basically, they couldn't catch him on anything. Like, you have debt, we can actually give you money, so you tell us yes, right? They couldn't control him, and they hate what they can't control. So they tried to topple him to bring a regime that will actually work in their favor, that they can control. And that's why they started funding this war in Syria with hundreds of billions of dollars. And the numbers are given by the prime minister himself, the former Qatari prime minister. Now, Qatar supports the Muslim Brotherhood, and it's like basically what you call a symbiotic relation between the Qatari regime and the Muslim Brotherhood. So by the time the GCC nations patched the rift with Assad regime towards 2021, 2022, they sent what you call their foreign affairs ministers to meet with him. Qatar was the only state that refused to actually meet with Bashar al-Assad, and they still were adamant at supporting the terrorists on the ground to topple the Assad regime. They were the ones who actually planned it with the Turks to have more terrorists on the ground and to actually pump more money into there. And they worked together with the Israelis to topple the Assad regime. And this is what happened eventually. So if you want to make sense of it, it's petty grievances between Arab states that actually fed into the sedition between them, that led to the Arab states basically funding a war against another Arab state to topple the regime over there, though it's internationally unacceptable and against the law. International law, you don't take part in an ongoing revolution. You sit on the side, and whoever wins, you either support them eventually, like you confess to their rule, or you say, like, we're cutting ties with this country because we don't like the new regime. So they took an active part in that war, funding it and supporting the terrorists on the ground. Basically, hundreds of thousands of Syrians were killed and displaced because of them, eventually. Because there are others who were killed and displaced also by the Assad
Yeah,
regime. So, like, nobody can deny that.
yeah, but what we hear even from the Israelis and even from people in the region is that, well, it's the Iranians and Assad that massacred all these people that died in Syria, and therefore, the Qataris and the Turks have no influence. Because from what I know, a lot of these foreign fighters that came in were actually being transited in from Turkey. A lot
True.
of them were in Idlib. There was even at a time there were tens of thousands of them in a place called Jisr al-Chubur, which is in Idlib. And
Just Shubur, true.
yeah, there's a particular group called Jaish al Muhajirun wal al Sham,
True.
which is led by a guy called Abu Omar al Shishani, Takan Batirashvili,
True.
and brought in most of these fighters from Dagestan and Chechnya and Central Asia. So the Turks
The
brought
ones
in
from
the
Central
fighters.
Asia, actually joined the Katibat Ghuraba Turkestani, which is basically that had the majority of the Uyghurs later on part of it. So Tajikistan, Turkestan, and basically the Uyghurs, as they call them, or the Uyghur,
Yeah,
they all
from
went under Katibat Ghuraba Turkestani, or basically the Legion of the Strangers of Turkestan. But it's not Turkestan, but
yeah,
like this is the name.
yeah.
So
But the name Turkestan or East Turkestan, funny enough, is what the separatists in Xinjiang province call themselves. They want to secede
true,
from China. Yeah, so you're right.
true.
Now I was referring to the South Caucasus, not Central Asia. The Kataib, what's his name? Jaish al Muhajirun wal Sham are mostly fighters from the South Caucasus, which is Georgia,
So we
Dagestan.
call those, instead of Central, we call them the Chechnyans. All of those who came from what you call the former Soviet Union bulk, we call them the Chechnyans. And basically, the Katibat Ghuraba Turkestani are the ones that we call them basically Central Asia to Far Asia, like Far East, like the ones that extend all the way to China. But you have to understand one thing: there are 5 types of terrorists who were fighting on the ground who were non-Syrian. You had the ones that were supported by the Assad regime in the past, who went over and attacked the Americans in Iraq. They used to cross the borders from Syria to Iraq. And this is something that nobody can hide. I mean, at one point or another, the Syrian regime had bred or allowed for those terrorists to be on its territories, knowing where they are, but never intervened because those people were fighting against what you call the Americans at that time. And they used them as a pressure card. So Syria used those as a pressure card against the Americans. And then you have the terrorists that came through Turkey. And those terrorists basically came from all across. And Turkey facilitated them. Turkey was the Blackwater of The North, I swear to God,
Yeah.
like Turkey played as the black water for mercenaries coming through Syria, through Turkey to Syria. If you remember, there was this American reporter who exposed the whole matter, and they assassinated her. And they hid basically the investigations. Nobody can investigate it anymore. That's an American reporter on the ground. And then when you look at the other side, you had terrorists basically also coming over from what you call through Lebanon. And you had, I'm not going to call the resistance in Lebanon terrorists for a reason, because they were officially invited by the Syrian government. And people
Yes.
basically, they accuse me of being what you call whitewashing terrorists. I'm not. I'm just using the terminologies of international law. If a government officially invites you to help it out, then your presence on the ground is either that of a legal militia
Yeah. Yeah.
or a
But you
mercenary,
also,
or a mercenary
but
if you
you,
pay them. But they were not
yeah.
paid. So
Yeah, but
they are,
just one quick one on that as well. I don't mean to interrupt because
no, no, it's
I'm
fine.
enjoying the flow of the conversation. Is that there was also a threat to Lebanon because I remember there were certain attacks in Assal, and that also played into the interest of. Although some will say, well, why did the Lebanese state not do that? And Hezbollah, you know, as a non-state actor, decided to go into the war, which is a question I will also ask you: why did Hezbollah, as a non-state actor, participate in the war in Syria?
Okay, so let's go back to this point. There are two types of people who went over to fight in Syria. One's from Beirut and North Lebanon and the Bekaa area, who were against the Assad regime, who occupied Lebanon for the longest time, and they tortured people. So there are lots of people who have vendetta against the Assad regime. And those people went over and they started fighting first with the revolutionaries, but then with anybody who would pay money, because we also had a financial crisis in Lebanon and everybody needed money. So those people, mainly the Sunnis, the radical Sunnis in Lebanon, went over to fight in Syria alongside terrorist groups like Julani groups. Okay, we had basically a Nusra Front, but later on when he actually created what you call Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, before Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, it was Ahrar al-Sham. They rebranded within the same year between 2016 and 2017. So those Lebanese fought with him against every other group that was fighting on the ground. Okay. Then there was basically the other Lebanese group, and that includes Hezbollah and Amal movement, who actually went into fighting in Syria in May 2013, not from the beginning of the war in 2011 like the rest of the Lebanese who actually fought in Syria did. Why? In 2013, in May 2000, shortly before May 2013, we had a series of explosions that basically Abu Muhammad al-Julani, who today calls himself Ahmed Shara, but he's not, he had basically ordered a series of strikes against Lebanon, suicide bombers who actually came about and started basically blasting themselves in Lebanon. Some of them, basically, their explosive belts didn't work, so they were detained. But others actually succeeded in killing and basically injuring hundreds of Lebanese, killing and injuring, okay? So like wounded plus those who were martyred. And most of those attacks happened against the social fabric of the resistance that supports the resistance, Hezbollah and Amal movement in the Beirut southern suburbs. At the same time, around the same time, a border town between Syria and Lebanon, it's on the
What is
Syrian territories, it's
is
called
it Al
Al-Qusayr.
Qusser? This
Yes,
is Al Qusser.
yes. Al-Qusayr, if you actually, no, you have to zoom in so I can explain it. All right? So the town of
Qusser.
Qusayr historically used to be part of Lebanon, and the French actually carved it out, and gave it to the Syrians during the creation of what you call the borders between both Lebanon and Syria. And the Lebanese over there are part of the clansmen who live on the other side of the borders in Lebanon. So the families continue to marry each other, and there's a large number of what you call Lebanese diaspora living in that village. They got attacked by the terrorists of Al-Julani and basically ISIS later on. And some of those people, their families actually are fighters in the resistance. So they had taken the permission to go and fight over there to defend their families. Some of the women were raped, some people were killed. So the resistance actually took part in defending their people in Al Qusayr. They crossed the borders over there, but they didn't venture deep inside the Syrian territories at that time. What happened is that they found, and it's all documented, you get to see the videos, they found factories that were manufacturing explosive belts. There were Captagon factories as well. So at the end of the day, it's not basically just the Syrian regime who is accused of basically trading with Captagon, it's also the terrorists on the ground, everybody who wanted to make a basically fast cash, aside from the money that they used to get from the GCC. Fast forward, almost 6 months down the line, the Syrian government, whose army was well fanned across the country fighting all these terrorists, and it was basically losing in certain places, asked its allies, Iranians and Hezbollah, to help out officially. So they actually took part in the war inside Syria, but they fought against the terrorist groups over there. They didn't fight against civilians as the propaganda ran. But for those who don't believe it, because they've been brainwashed by nearly a decade of what you call American propaganda, Jeffrey Feltman in 2016 stood out there and he said, we've spent $500 million to disfigure or what you call smear the image of Hezbollah in the region and beyond. So all that smear campaign was about Hezbollah fighters raping women, Hezbollah fighters killing children, Hezbollah fighters killing civilians, etc. Now, on the ground, you don't know who's fighting whom. And for the civilians, if I tell you basically I'm with Hezbollah, but I'm not, I will tend to believe what you say. And this is how the propaganda started flowing. Yes, there were mistakes committed, and I'm not defending Hezbollah when it comes to Syria. Mistakes were done on the ground when they started recruiting Syrians to fight alongside Hezbollah. So there was the Syrian Hezbollah fighting alongside, and perhaps the mistakes happened from that side because everybody across the world saw how Hezbollah fights against the Israelis. If they wanted to harm civilians, they would have harmed them from day one. If they wanted to go in and basically do anything, they would have done that from day one. But it's all propaganda. So having said that, throughout that period, Hezbollah and the Iranians actually managed to what you call group the terrorists in a small place in the northwestern part of Syria, mainly in Idlib, if you remember.
Yeah.
And
in the north.
yeah, and that area had basically the Turkish control over it. And the Turkish control basically supported the Muslim Brotherhood also over there, who used to be like, remember in Hama and other places which were fought by the former Assad regime, like the father of Bashar al-Assad, Hafiz al-Assad, the former president. He actually, I'm not going to say nuked them, but he gassed them and he bombarded them over there, the Muslim
In
Brotherhood.
Ham.
They were in
So
Hama
this
and
was in Hama, and I think in Homs, in Hama.
yes, yeah. And it was in certain areas because the largest bulk was in Hama. But there were some people also in Idlib and other areas that were fought on the ground without having to like basically have all what you call this major attack against them. So when you look at the situation, the Muslim Brotherhood over there tried back in the 80s to create what you call this revolution, and they failed. And then they tried again in 2011, and they were supported by Turkey, Qatar, and the rest of the Arab nations. And this is why they managed to actually create much damage on the ground. So by the time that all these terrorists were grouped in one place closer to the Turkish borders, or like away from Damascus, that's when Bashar al-Assad made his fatal mistake. He is like, okay, so I'm in control of the situation. There's no need for Hezbollah anymore or the Iranians. So he told them, thank you, get out of the country. And they left. And that was the cardinal mistake that he made.
But would you say this? He did that to whitewash himself, to give himself a good image, because there was a lot of pressure that they brought in all these foreign fighters. And by the way, it wasn't just Hezbollah. There were other, fighters that came in from Iraq and
Of
from
course, but I'm coming to the next step of the terrorists as well. So like we spoke about the ones who came from Turkey. We spoke the ones that came basically the ones that that came from Lebanon. We spoke about the ones that actually came about from Syria towards Iraq. Then they came back from Iraq towards Syria. And then you had ISIS that was basically established in the region, that was supported by the Americans and the Israelis, that fanned about from Iraq to Syria as well, which actually gathered some of those riffraffs alongside them. So the fifth one was the one that basically what you call supported from an international audience. And in that manner, we're going to call them the ones who came from Chechnya, from China, from the UK, from France, from other countries. And those were brought about by multiple what you call mercenary groups, private military companies that were funded for by some GCC states, including Qatar and Saudi Arabia. And the Americans and the Israelis gave them air cover and cover on the ground as well. So all of those together were fighting in Syria. It was an international war on Syrian territories. But the reason was not only to topple the Assad regime, because the petty grievances between Arabs and basically Assad regime is one thing. But when it comes to the actual fight, it has been prepared by the Americans for the longest time. But the Israelis also were preparing for it. Not a single state that has direct borders or proximity to the Israeli entity is allowed to have strategic weapons. And in 2011, if you remember, 2012, the Israelis first came up and they bombarded what you call a chemical factory in the desert of Syria. And that's when everybody knew that the Israelis are trying to destroy the what you call the abilities of the Syrian army in acquiring chemical weapons. They didn't want to have strategic weapons at their borders that could threaten them. So this is why the war started over in Syria. The Americans had been planning it for so long. For those who don't believe me, you can go to what General Wesley Clark said in 2004 and later on repeated it in 2009, 2010, all the way until today. General Wesley Clark said that in 2002, 2003, he was approached by somebody who works at the Pentagon while he was visiting. And that guy told him that the decision has been made to topple the regimes or create chaos in 7 states. And he named them. And that included Egypt and Lebanon, Lebanon and Syria. So Syria was one of those, and it ended with Iran. Iran was the 7th state. So Iran was always the end goal for the Americans, whereas Syria was one of the states that would clip the wings of Iran from expanding in the region, and it would clip the wings of anybody supporting Iran as well, and an ally to Iran, and an ally to the Russians as well in the Eastern Mediterranean region. So that's why they were creating this string of what you call toppling the regimes to create what you call organized chaos across the region, so they can actually reshape the region into the new Middle East that they have been planning it for so long and they can control. And they cannot control the new Middle East without toppling the strongest ally of the Russians, which is basically the Iranians. Now, Iran is a massive country as opposed to others. That's why they were surrounding it with what you call military bases. That's why they were targeting it with propaganda throughout the past 20 years. They have established more than 63 media outlets to target the Persian audience with Persian language, including basically Saudi channels that actually speak Persian, NBC Persia, for example, among others. And slowly but surely, you start to changing the people's mindset. And eventually, when you create problems on the ground and you put sanctions, economic sanctions for the longest time, and you impoverish the people and the government, that's when you actually can move military-wise and weaken that state. Now, we're going to talk about Iran later on, I know that, but I'm explaining basically the whole situation on where does Syria fall in this. Syria falls in this as an ally to Iran, as an ally to the Russians. And it had to be toppled so you can actually corner the resistance in Lebanon, which is the strongest threat to the Israeli entity. The only weapons or the majority bulk of weapons and training that used to come to the resistance in Lebanon used to come from Iran through Syria to Lebanon. Once you topple the regime in Syria and you put somebody who is pro-Mossad, pro-Israeli in the government, basically in the government or basically in rule, just like we saw with Julani. He's a self-appointed president. He was not
Hold
elected.
on, hold on. Back up a second. Again, a lot of information.
Sorry.
What do you mean pro Mossad, pro Israeli? Because from what we had on the ground, it was a popular movement that toppled Assad. They brought in this guy that is charismatic, that is, that connects with what the Syrians really want. So, are you saying for a second that Jolani is not really who we think he is? Because from what I see on the ground, a lot of Syrians were celebrating that Assad was gone. And they're showing all these pictures of Sednaya prison and the whole atrocities that Assad have committed. And then this guy have come in to liberate them. In fact, there were reports, people were celebrating that, oh, we're going to get back the Golan Heights now. The whole of Syrian territory is going to be ours and Syria is going to be prosperous again. And you are saying that all of that is a hogwash.
Well, let me explain one thing. Like, people need to read history. The problem is that with people in our region, they don't read. And if they read, they forget or they don't understand. And I'm not attacking people, but I think it's because of the quick lifestyle that everybody has. Nobody has time to actually sit and think about it. It's my job to sit and think. So I used to get paid to do this kind of job as a strategist. And when you look at the whole situation, you start finding out things that are unbelievable. So let's start with the history of Syria. The Israelis actually managed to plant what you call a spy in Syria. His name was Eli Cohen, but his ground name was Kamel Amin Thabit. The guy planted himself as a Syrian who came from diaspora from Argentina that wanted to actually invest in his own country. And Kamel Amin Thabit managed to convince all the Syrians and all Syrian officials with the right documentations that he had with him and his charismatic basically character and his basically ability to actually access all these circles, that to the extent that they were about to appoint him as the deputy defense minister in Syria. And that's an Israeli who's Jewish, who was born and raised to Egyptian Jewish parents in Egypt before moving to the Israeli entity. He had zero connection to the Syrian land, okay? So he was not Syrian. But he managed to sell himself as Syrian to the whole Syrian people and the officials themselves, because they had people who inside the Syrian regime who were able to what you call not for falsify papers for him, but they acquired him the right documentations to give him a new identity as a Syrian who lived in Argentina. That's why he had an accent supposedly, and he came back to the homeland. Now, Julani, when he came about to Syria, nobody knew about him. Okay, and there are lots of discrepancies in terms of what he spoke during the interviews. And we had people looking into the registrar in Saudi Arabia, in Syria, and in Iraq, looking for somebody called Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, and there was no existence for that guy. But of course, once you take over power, you get to falsify whatever papers you want, and you become legal as a president at any point. And he nationalized over 30,000 foreign fighters, including some of them Lebanese, by the way. So going back to Julani, Ahmed al-Julani, how did he come about to Syria? He was sent from Iraq supposedly to Syria to be the head of Al-Qaeda in collaboration with ISIS, right? Al-Qaeda is basically, we're talking about his group, it's called Jabhat al-Nusra fi Bilad al-Sham, al-Nusra Front in the Levant, which basically is Al-Qaeda's arm in the Levant, okay? That guy is a proscribed terrorist who not only killed Iraqis and Lebanese, but also Syrians. And now he's the president. And they're trying to whitewash his background. Now, does anybody mention his terrorist background? The US just scratched him from the terrorist list when they wanted. But what was the main reason for bringing him over? The first thing that he said before the last attack against the Assad regime, what did he say? He said, we're going to liberate Jerusalem. We're going to pray in Jerusalem. And the moment he took over power, what did he say? We have no power to fight the Israelis. Not a single bullet was fired by his people against the Israeli entity who now controls more than 600 kilometers squared of South Syria, Southeast Syria, and parts of Southwest Syria, including the basin, the Al Yarmouk basin, which controls 30% of water that is needed by the Israeli entity for itself, because the Israeli entity and Palestine are basically what you call dry land. So when you look at the whole situation, they planted somebody to sign a peace agreement, and I remember December 2024, and I have it in a recorded space. I wrote, basically, I told my listeners on Twitter, and I said, we have credible information that Julani met with Israeli Mossad officials on this night, and they stayed for half an hour before they left back to the Israeli entity. And I was afraid that somebody would delete that space, so I wrote it in a tweet, and I said, what was the Israeli helicopter doing on the peripheries of Damascus for nearly half an hour, and who did it meet? So it's in writing. I have it in writing as well. December 2024, everybody made fun of us as MENA Uncensored team, and we don't work haphazardly. We have contacts on the ground. Then, January, February 2025, we wrote that Julani met again with the Israeli officials for a longer time discussing the Abraham Accord. February 2025, people also made fun and like, no, it's far-fetched. This guy is the Fatih, the conquistador. He's the lion of the Sunnah, blah, 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 you know. They're trying to shush you, and they do smear campaigns against you, so you wouldn't tell people what's happening on the ground. February 2025, one of the MPs from the Israeli Knesset, from the Hatoum family, he comes out and he says, we are meeting with Julani, like our officials have met with Julani. And everybody from the Muslim Brotherhood to the GCC states, so everybody's like, we don't see, we don't hear, we don't talk. Then again, Shibani met officially a month and a half ago with Julani in Paris, and this meeting was attended by Tom Barak, the US envoy to Syria and Lebanon, and he's also the US ambassador to Turkey. And they did it officially. And the next meeting that happened between Asad Shibani, who was the foreign affairs minister of Syria, and his Israeli counterpart in Paris, happened 2 days ago. And they announced it on the Syrian National News Agency, SANA, Syrian Arab News Agency. It was officially announced. So Julani was put there on purpose for a reason, to actually sign an Abrahamic Accord with the Israelis, peace treaty, that allows the Israelis to annex all of Golan Heights, if not 3/4 of it, and that last quarter, this is what they're discussing, should it be under the Syrian control, but the Israelis lease it from them or not? We actually divulged all those points beforehand, like 3 months ago, that they're discussing what's going to happen to Julan and what were proposed on the table, because we had somebody inside in Paris who actually gave us the information, and it's in recorded space as well. We spoke about how basically they are going to allow for investments, Israeli investments in Syria and vice versa. Companies that are owned by the Israelis who would take contracts inside Syria without any competition. And if you look at the whole situation, the Israelis look at Syria, most of it as part of Greater Israel, and they want to. I mean, they keep throwing information in the media that makes people think, look at one place, but things are happening in a different place. So, like
Yeah.
the Zanzibar the corridor, if you remember, or David's corridor, David's path, right? This is
Yeah.
irrelevant. They're going to take almost all of Syria. So this is irrelevant. The naming is irrelevant. They don't want a corridor. They want 3/4 of Syria. They don't want just a corridor. And if you look at the whole situation, there's also the issue of the Kurds. The Kurds in the northeast Syria, and basically they want to unify with the Kurds in Iraq from Erbil and other places who are allies to the Israelis. The Israelis don't want to give them a Kurdish territory.
Yeah,
They
but
will
the
keep it
what?
autonomous, but not a state. So they can always run
So
after
what?
them. Like,
Yeah. So what is the purpose of supporting the Kurds in Rojava in Syria and the Kurds in Erbil? Like the because the Kurds in Iraq are also divided. There's the Barzani part in Erbil and there's the Talibani part in Suleimania. These
yeah,
two
but
guys don't really.
almost all of the Kurds want to create a Kurdish state on Iraqi, Turkish, and Syrian territories. It's that triangle between northeast Syria and basically southeast Turkey and basically Iraq from the other side. That triangle will be the new Kurdistan for the Kurds. This is what they think that is going to be given to them because the Americans supposedly had promised them, but they will never have a state of their own. Why? Because the Americans want to keep them on a leash. They will give them an autonomous region, but never a state of their own. That's why SDF, the Syrian Democratic Forces, or we call them Qasad, Quwat Suriyat Demokratiya in Arabic, they were supposed to be handing over their weapons to Julani, and then later
But
on
it
they found
didn't.
out that they were
It
going to
didn't
be
happen.
backstabbed. They backed off from that. They signed an agreement with him, then they backed off after they saw what he did to the other people who actually handed over the weapons, the
Yeah,
Alawites and the Christians.
in the north, which is on the coast in
It's
Latakia and
northwest of Syria, exactly, the west coast of Syria.
Tartus, and I even saw the videos in Banias, dragging them like dogs and beating them and
Yeah.
making them, back like dogs. Yeah, it's crazy. Yeah, so apart from
So,
Turkey
so that person
and
never existed. I'm sorry, but like
yeah,
Julani never
Jolani.
existed on paper because there were three versions of the story that he was born in Saudi Arabia. Then they said like no, he was born in Syria. No, he was born etc. And he was neither born in Julan nor born basically inside Syria and Hama or whatever they want to call it. And he was never born in Saudi Arabia. We couldn't find papers that corroborate that story. Then we looked into basically his background as supposedly somebody who got detained in Iraq at one point by the Americans and then he was let go. This is how you actually create terrorists, like somebody that you release from jail, that he's Syrian, and then you send him to a place and then basically he sets that background and narrative that he's Syrian. But nobody
Yeah,
knew who Abu Muhammad Julani until much later, right? This is what people think. But if you actually do a small search on, like proper search online, the first person to mention the name Ahmed al-Shara, Ahmed Hussein al-Shara, was an antiques dealer from the UK who is self-proclaimed expert on terrorists, who said that Abu Muhammad al-Julani is actually Ahmed al-Shara. And then that story died on its own. That person, we believe that he's part of MI6. And this is how you start planting traces in the media. So in the future, when you start searching, you'll find that background
they
for
find
him.
it.
The
Yeah,
second time that his name was mentioned as Ahmed al-Shara was in 2021 when Ahmed al-Shara, basically Julani, gave an interview to PBS TV, which is an American TV. And he said basically that, like they said that his name was Ahmed Shara, but nobody created a fuss about it. They let it be mitigated. Again, nobody focused on that point.
yeah,
Why? Because if you create commotion, people will go and search. The Assad regime is already in power. They can go out and say, like, this person doesn't exist. This is not true. They let it fizzle away, but it has a digital trace. And then when the Assad regime got toppled, he came out and said, I'm Ahmed al-Shara. And then they claim that he studied media. He didn't. Then they claim that he studied medicine. He didn't. Then they claim that basically he studied business administration and he
so
didn't.
yeah, so
So
who the
like
who the hell
always
who the
three
hell is
stories.
yeah, so who the hell is this guy if we don't have any trace of him, if the whole stories are being planted, in order to deceive and in order to disguise his identity? Does it have any connection to Abu Musab al-Zakawi? Because again, with the whole Zakawi story and how he left Jordan, born in Zarqa, it's all shady. These have always been like the whole ploy by Mossad in the region, where they create these fake identities of individuals that we have no idea where they come from. Is it the same thing we are seeing in Syria? And who the hell is in charge in
It's
Syria?
he's exactly the same case scenario as Eli Cohen or basically agent Kamel Amin Thabit. the Israeli Mossad agent who was planted among the Syrians as a Syrian with proper documentation. And by the way, when we exposed Julani, and it's in a recorded space back in December 2023, the next week, the week right after, we actually said that we couldn't find any papers or documentation for him in Syrian documentation centers, like the nationality centers and the passport centers, right? The Israeli came about with their warplanes and destroyed every single documentation center in Syria. You can go back; it's all recorded.
Yeah.
Now, not only our space, but also the attacks against the passport and basically what you call nationality centers in Syria were attacked and completely destroyed by the Israelis. Why? Because when this guy took over power, he can issue his own papers as the new self-appointed president of Syria. Then he nationalized 30,000 foreigners as Syrian. Can you claim that they're not Syrian now? No, legally now they're Syrian, supposedly, including Lebanese. And I will give you an example of the Lebanese who fought alongside him, and now they hold high positions with the Syrian passport. One of them is from the Shahadi family. He defected from the Lebanese army in 2011-2012 and started fighting alongside Al-Qaeda, Al-Nusra Front in Syria, along Abu Muhammad al-Julani. Today, that person is tasked with handling the intelligence apparatus alongside, along the Lebanese borders, along the Syrian borders with Lebanon. And he is the one who negotiates with the Lebanese army on behalf of Julani. And there's another person as well who recently not recently, but he had defected long time ago from Lebanon. He was detained in Lebanon multiple times. His name is Shadi al-Mawlawi. Shadi al-Mawlawi was detained in Lebanon, and at one point, one of our prime ministers got him out in his car from detention, not from jail. And that prime minister is Najib Mikati, whom I personally believe he has ties with the French. Okay, so let's keep it on the side. That person got out of jail, went over and rejoined Julani people. Julani recently appointed him as the head. Back then, he appointed him as not the da'wah person, but today he is appointed as the head of what you call the prisons of Julani in Syria. He's of Lebanese origin and he has now the Syrian passport. So this is the kind of people who fought with Julani since day one, and they're all terrorists, but nobody mentions them in the media. However, the American media and GCC media all focused on what? Hezbollah fighting in Syria since 2013, not 2011, and Hezbollah killing the Syrians, not those people, among other terrorists, since 2011, killing Syrians in the name of a revolution. The revolution started with actually honest people who were fed up with the Syrian regime. I give them that. But it was soon hijacked by all these terrorists, and that revolution didn't happen haphazardly. The thing is, all these international powers will find a weak spot and basically will cap on people's hatred towards the regime, and then they will move them on the street with anything. And then they will cap on it and then hijack the revolution. It will seemingly appear as a revolution in the media that they have created, but it's actually a war on Syria.
Yeah, and from the outside looking in, you think, oh, it's a revolution. The people are tired of the government. They're trying to kick out Assad. But if you look at the way what happened in Syria and the intervention from the outside in Syria, compare that to Bahrain, for instance, where there was a similar uprising against the minority government, and the way the kind of response we got from the West, they supported and shore up the regime. There could have been similar. There were noises, about the similar uprisings of parts of Saudi Arabia. It never saw the light of the day, and so on and so forth. But why Syria? Why? Because again, like you said, Syria have refused to acquiesce to the dictates of the powers that be in the region.
Show the map of Syria. Show the map of Syria. I want to point out something.
I will in a second. I will in a second. But I want to finish up on
the. There's a delay.
I will in a second. But I want to finish up on the issue of Ahmed al-Shara, aka Abu Muhammad al-Jolani. If he, in quotes, because we are speaking tentatively here, is an Israeli agent. We don't know for sure.
No, I know for sure. You can be not sure. I am sure.
Yeah. So why did
it? Not leap of faith. I will believe my context when they say he is Israeli. Full stop.
Yeah. Yeah. So why did the Turks support him? Why did the Turks arm him to the teeth, and supported him to the end, until the end where they removed Assad, and continue to believe?
So show the map to explain to why the Turks supported them. Show the map of Syria now. I'm going to explain it on the map. Okay. So at one point or another, the Turks support the Muslim Brotherhood. The Muslim Brotherhood are against Assad. That's one. Two, Turkey couldn't beat. Okay, if you zoom in on Syria and the borders between Syria and Turkey couldn't beat Syria when it comes to the manufacturing of what you call textile and food industry. They always competed against one another. The first thing that the terrorist groups that came from Turkey did when they entered Syria was attack the textile industry steal all the machinery that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars, and bring them back to Turkey. They destroyed most of the food and agriculture-related, basically industries, agro-industries in Syria. And the ones who dumped all their products into Syria were Turkey. So like economy-wise, the Turks benefit from that. What else? The Turks want to what you call subside the Kurdish threat to them. Now the Kurds are in northeast Syria. So like, do you see like that small angle towards basically the right side of
Gaziantep,
the screen? Yeah.
Gaziantep, Iskenderun, Antakya, like the whole region.
No, no,
I
no, no,
think
no,
it's
no, 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 no. I'm not talking about this one.
not
Look the other
okay.
side. No, yeah. So
Al Hasaka,
northeast.
Al Hasaka.
Exactly. So from Al-Hasak all the way to the borders with Iraq, that area poses a threat to the Turkish side across the border, because that's where basically the Kurds want to be separate, like separating with the Kurds from the other side and creating their Kurdish state at the expense of the Turkish territories. So what they did, the
So,
Turks now, they have dozens of what you call bases inside Syria at the moment, in North Syria and Northwest Syria, to just go and control and subside that Kurdish threat. The
yeah, so
agreement between the Turks and the Americans is to never allow the Kurds to have a state of their own, but they can have an autonomous region. This is why I'm telling you, like, there's not going to be basically what you call a Kurdish state going forward. So the Turks also want to control that part for geostrategic purposes. That's basically controlling the Kurds. And the last point, so aside from the Muslim Brotherhood, aside from the it's not agro, the business and the industry, among other things, there's also basically the Kurdish threat. And the fourth point, and this is the main one, is basically Turkey wants to be a main player in the region. And the only way it can do so is if it has what you call pressure cards on the table, that it can actually allow it to sit and deal with the big states, the US, Russia, China, you name it, because they control parts of what you call Syria through the Muslim Brotherhood that controls Syria at this point. So this is these are the four main reasons why Turkey is invested in that. That's aside basically from controlling what you call any wealth that appears in the sea between Syria and Turkey. And basically it secures the northern part of Cyprus that Turkey controls as well. So that triangle now belongs to Turkey, and I control anything that passes through there all the way to Europe. Geostrategic position again.
yeah, so it's about the geopolitics of it. But again, if the talks knew about the role of the Mossad, for instance, in supporting and propping up Jolani, why would they want to put themselves in that situation? Because the Israelis are now also asking questions of Jolani and his
But the
government.
Turks are
And
allies with the Israelis. I mean, this is
yeah,
something that
yeah,
people
yeah,
don't cap
yeah,
on. The
yeah,
Turks are allies with the Israelis. The Turks
yeah, but
continue to send perishables and energy to the Israeli entity. The Turks continue to support the Israeli entity with not only boots, military boots, but they also supported them with manufactured bombs. We have proof with pictures that we posted on Twitter of bombs that actually read "Made in Turkey" on them, that were used against the people of Gaza. The ones who cry over Gaza day and night on TV, like Erdogan, are the ones who are enabling the Israeli occupation to continue to, I was going to say unalive, to kill the Palestinians in Gaza. So at the end of the day, the Turks, they don't care about us. They dream of the Ottoman Empire. They have an extension through their allies. They want to sell weapons like drones, among other things. And by the way, the main military drone seller in the region are the Turks and then the Iranians. The Turks through the Bayraktar group, which is basically owned by the son-in-law of Erdogan, the one who actually brings about the energy
and
tankers. Sorry, go
yeah,
ahead.
and it's good it's good you brought up the name. Is it Berakta, or I know the
Bayraktar is basically the name of the, like the last name of
Berakta.
the
So
Bayraktar group. They also do it in Africa,
basically,
by the way.
in Ukraine, by the way, they set up its stuff in Ukraine, and they were, because there's a big story about that as well on the Russian side, which is something we can
They
talk
were
about again.
testing their drones in Ukraine, and then they started selling to Ukraine. And they're selling basically to African nations. They're selling to GCC nations like Kuwait. They signed an agreement with Kuwait, and they were trying to sign an agreement with Qatar recently. So if you look at the whole situation, Turkey wants to expand as the main exporter of what you call military equipment through the son-in-law of Erdogan. The son of Erdogan, Bilal Erdogan, actually controls the oil tankers that brings about the Azerbaijani oil that comes to Turkey and then to the Israeli entity. So it actually brings that oil from Turkey to the Israeli entity all the time. And that's the regime that's supporting the Israeli entity. So at any point, the Turks will have no problem with the Israelis taking over 3/4 of Syria, as Netanyahu had showed on the map. However, the northernmost part of Syria is left The Israelis are not saying it's part of Greater Israel. Do you know why? Because it's
Why?
left to Turkey. It's left to Turkey.
Yeah, so are you suggesting for a second that this is some kind of reenactment of Sykes-Picot with these two powers ganging up to carve up Syria?
It's all the powers ganging up to change the Middle East, and each one is trying to make what you call a grab of its own. Like they're grabbing land and they're dividing land among each other. Whoever supports the winning side will get a piece of the land at the end of the day. And if you don't believe me, I mean, it's like too many coincidences are not coincidences. It becomes an actual plan that is in place that has been happening for the longest time. The Americans have been speaking about the New Middle East. The Israelis have been speaking about New Middle East since when? Since the 70s and 80s. Kissinger had spoken about the New Middle East. I mean, like the most stupid of all the US basically presidents, what's his name, like that adulterer, Clinton. He actually spoke
Yeah.
about the New Middle East basically since 1996 or 1998. And if you look at the whole situation, everybody had been speaking about it except for the Arabs and the people of the Levant sitting there like, no, it's not going to happen. We don't believe it. It's really hard to happen. Like they live on hope. And this is why
Yeah.
they lose all the time. They're not strategists. They actually, you tell them what's going to happen, and they will attack you for telling them what's going to happen, and then they will tell you it's not true, and then they will try to smear you over that. I faced it myself
Yes.
personally. So,
Somebody needs to clip this. Like this is this is golden. The fact that you're able to say this, and exactly because it seems that the outside powers see this, they see the division, they see the sectarianism, and they come in to play this game of divide and rule. And the Arabs in the region are saying, well, it's not like that. It's resistance. These guys are Islamists, and we stand with them because they're defending the religion, they're defending the faith. And know how there's no way on earth Jolani can ever be allies of the Israelis. And by the way, you said something before, which
mm,
is which I asked you. I'm like, oh, if Jolani is really working with Israelis or have any contact with the Israelis, why the hell are they bombing him? And what was your response that day? Can you tell
okay.
them?
Oh, it's very easy. How do you actually establish the credibility of someone when Julani actually took over power and he refused to fight against the Israelis? That's when people start saying like, oh, he's in league with the Israelis. He's not basically pro basically Syria. He's going to do this and that. It's bad, etc. So how do you give somebody credibility? You bombard
Yeah,
here
but
and there,
by,
but you don't
by
assassinate him.
attacking them. Yeah, but
They could have easily taken him down. They could have easily taken him down. They didn't. They bombarded here and there. They eliminated the ability of the Syrian Arab army. They destroyed all the weapons of the Syrian Arab army, not Julani. Why? Because they feared that the remnants of the Syrian army would use some of those weapons to attack the Israelis later on and create resistance movements. They didn't attack Julani per se. The most recent attack that happened against basically what you call entities that belong to Julani was the one that we saw 2 months to 3 months ago when they bombarded what you call next to the defense ministry and next to the what you call presidential palace, but not the presidential palace. And the whole idea is that is to give him credibility. Like, how do you plant an agent? You attack him and then create stories about how he hates you and you hate him. And then when people search about it, like, oh, the guy has a history in doing that. And this is how you actually this is how you plant your own agent. How did they plant Eli Cohen? How did they plant lots of basically what you call spies on the ground? They create these stories that give them credibility, that they are against a certain entity or regime or whatever it is. And they do it for the longest time to the extent that it becomes in people's minds, this person basically is credible. And that's how they believe them. And this is what the Israelis did. Like, they didn't attack him except for that one incident, and that's it. That's it. And now
yeah,
he's
so that
signing what you call the Abrahamic Accords with them. Go figure.
yeah, and yeah, I mean, he's not signed the accord yet, but there are conversations that he's been back channeling to the Israelis and to
No,
the
no, trust me,
Americans.
it's already they already had done everything. It needs basically is for the Israelis to finish with the Gaza front and the annexation of most of the parts of the West Bank. They will take the West Bank, all of it, but this will happen in the next month or so. That we'll be hearing about the Abrahamic Accords with the Syrians. They just basically have to wait for some time because the situation internally is not what you call ready yet for that announcement to be made. But it has been ongoing for months. They have already planned it beforehand, before they brought him over.
Yeah. Speaking of that, let's go to Gaza. You mentioned Gaza. What is the
Yes.
possibility of a ceasefire in Gaza? And what do the Israelis really want in Gaza? Do they want the entirety of the Gaza Strip, or are they looking to disarm Hamas like they are claiming? What is the ultimate goal? What is the final solution, if you like,
Zoom on
in
Gaza,
Gaza?
please. Zoom on
Okay.
Gaza. I love giving you
Yeah.
orders, by the way.
Yeah, it's
Like,
okay.
No, it's a
let's
joke.
yeah, I
Zoom.
know. It's okay.
This is so much
Yeah.
fun.
So this is Gaza.
Zoom in more
Uh,
and then go towards the seaside and push it a little bit down southwards. Like push it down. Like yeah, I want like okay, a little bit backwards, back, a little bit back. I want to see like the yeah, just like zoom out, a little bit zoom out. So like I'm going like this, a little bit more, and then drop it down. Drop it towards no. Keep it as such and drop it down. Drop it down.
oh,
Guys, you see
okay.
where yeah. So yeah, pull it down, drag it down. Can you do that? Or
Yeah,
like this is a
I will expand it.
okay,
This.
perfect. This is fine. So guys, you see where Gaza is, right? That's the last spit of land of Palestine that's directly by the shorelines of the Mediterranean that the Israelis don't control. The Israelis want to control all of the Palestinian coastline. That's the last part of the Palestinian coastline that they cannot control, that they haven't controlled. Now, if you zoom out a little bit, that shows from Lebanon to Gaza, you get to see that whole coastline. Off the shore of, basically, off the coast of Gaza are some of the largest energy, what you call offshore fields, gas and oil. And it's not a matter of what you call speculation. The Israelis have been drilling and exploring for energy there for some time now, for nearly 3 years. For nearly 3 years. So they want to control that whole area and they want to basically control all the resources over there. And at the end of the day, the Palestinians will get nothing. Do you think they're going to share it with the Palestinians? No. Do you think that they're going to keep the Palestinians in the Gaza Strip? No. We have already exposed the Israelis and their plans since December 2023 until today. Every single time we were giving you the new face, like months before the Israelis started doing it. Months. Even some battles, basically hours to days before it happened. So that's because we have a contact called Ghost. And fingers crossed that Ghost basically continues to be safe and giving us information. So far, zero information. Oh, electricity got cut off. It will come
Yeah,
back. Don't worry.
yeah. We did the
Third
same
world
in
country,
Nigeria.
Banana
Yeah, we did
Republic
the
of
same.
Lebanon.
Yeah, it's the same thing in Nigeria. The light goes off. Yeah, yeah.
Like,
But anyways,
so
yeah.
yeah. So
So basically, you're saying that there's almost no hope at this point in time that we have
no, the
any real
Israelis are
ceasefire.
planning on basically pushing down all the 700,000 to 650,000 Palestinians in North Gaza, down to Central Gaza, from Central Gaza down to the south, to concentration camps where people will either they will continue to starve until death, or they will agree to leave without coming back to Gaza ever. They want to take all of Gaza. And the sad part is that there are Arab nations who have invested in the new resorts in Gaza. That includes the PIF, the Public
Whoa,
Investment Fund of
whoa,
Saudi
whoa, whoa.
Arabia.
Hold on. You're saying that the Arab countries that are supposed to be helping the Gazans have invested a lot of money in beachfront properties, aiding Israeli occupation and the bombardment and the killing of Palestinian children for their own economic benefit.
Well, the thing
Not
is,
economic.
they invested in companies that are going to be part of those resort building and the real estate plan for what you call Gaza. So remember when Trump spoke about the real estate Riviera, like the Gaza will be the new Riviera, but it's not going to be for Palestinians. And the ones who actually invested in those companies, okay, are the Public Investment Fund of Saudi Arabia, the Emiratis, especially Abu Dhabi, and then you have other countries as well. And that's why they are pushing hard towards the dismantling of what you call Hamas's governance in Gaza, and at the same time, basically disarmament of Hamas. Now, the interesting part is that Turkey and Qatar have joined the countries that are actually pushing Hamas towards disarmament. They actually called upon Hamas to disarm. Qatar and Turkey, which tells you that Qatar had normalized ties under the table with the Israelis, and they have a vested interest in exploration of oil and gas, and basically in the shorelines of coast of Gaza. And then you have basically the Turks, who are direct allies with the Israeli occupation, and they were trying to ride on the back of the Palestinian cause and trying to ride on the back of Hamas, using Hamas as a tool through the Muslim Brotherhood basically support. And eventually they showed the real face when they started calling upon Hamas to hand over their weapons. Now, I'm going to say stupid, should I say like several foolish Arab states, unfortunately, and Organization of Islamic Countries, they are part of it as well. Those countries believe that they will be the task force on the ground maintaining security in Gaza. They don't
Wow.
understand that they're going to be the what you call the pet dog of the Israelis over there, maintaining the security of the Israeli entity, not the Palestinians.
Yeah, yeah. So what sort of
That
security
includes
are they?
Egypt, by the way. That includes Egypt. Security that would basically would make sure that no resistance movement would ever raise its head in Gaza against the Israeli entity.
Would this be with Gazans living in on the territory, or with them, heading into the south, with the possibility of
No, no,
expelling them
no.
completely?
Those countries actually think that the people of Gaza will remain in Gaza. The Israelis are
Okay.
working towards ethnically cleansing all of Gaza and taking them out in phases, but they will do it eventually. This is what they're doing. They're playing chess. They were moving
So
them
it's a
from
game of
south to
deception. So
yeah.
this is a game of deception.
I mean, like, it's not only games, it's like they were telling you what they were going to do, but they know that the Arabs don't think. They are not strategists and they work and act emotionally. They get angry
Hmm.
really fast, they get calm really fast, and they do all the mistakes, and they have files on them, spying on them, among other things. I mean, those leaders. So they can threaten them with that. So when you look at the whole situation, I'll give you something that Turki Faisal and Yazid bin Farhan had said at the same time. Those are Saudi officials. One of them was the former head of intelligence apparatus in Saudi Arabia. The other one basically is the foreign affairs minister of Saudi Arabia. Their statement was that we cannot fight the Israelis. We're not as strong. And we prefer to have stability and negotiate things through peaceful means. And I had written him on Twitter, like I actually quote tweeted his statement saying, the Turki Faisal at the time, the former head of the intelligence apparatus in Syria. I said, no, brother, don't say that. Just admit it that you are cowards, that they don't want to fight because you're cowards, not because you don't think that you can do anything. Your collective power combined can actually wipe out the Israeli entity, but you don't want to because you're cowards, because of their vendetta, because of the petty grievances they have. And of course, he didn't comment on it, but like my quote tweet is still there. Like I can actually send it to you later on. And I wrote it in
Or,
Arabic, but in Fusha, so you can actually use Google Translate and it will give you the exact word and meaning.
or is it because they are complicit, or is it because they know
They're,
exactly what is going on, and they're doing that to show to continue to keep their own base of support and to
it's not only
continue to get.
complicity. Look, when it comes to the Saudis, people have to differentiate between the various Arab states. For the UAE, they are totally complicit because they have normalized ties with the Israeli entity. But again, out of the 7 emirates in the United Arab Emirates, there's one emirate that refuses to normalize ties with the Israeli entity until today, and that's the Emirate of Sharjah. And the wife of the ruler of Sharjah, Sheikha Jawahir, continues to take to Twitter to attack not only the Israelis, but also the practices of her own federal government, of how they're basically dealing with the Palestinian cause and what they're doing with the Israelis. So she's very vocal about it. So not all the Emiratis agree to the normalizing of ties. The Abu Dhabi government, which controls 60% of the budget of the UAE, of the federal government, they control the media. And everybody's afraid of them. So at the end of the day, they will control the narrative that comes out from the UAE that everybody's homogeneous in terms of supporting the Israelis, or basically at any point we do humanitarian work with the Palestinians, but we are staunch allies of the Israelis, and everybody who is Emirati supports the Israelis. This is not true. The whole emirate of Sharjah is against normalizing ties with the Israeli entity, and they don't give licenses to the Israelis. They don't rent houses to the Israelis, among other things that they refuse to do as well. And I respect them for that, right? Now, move forward. The Emiratis are already complicit through that normalizing of ties and enabling the Israeli entity, investing billions of dollars, tens of billions of dollars in the Israeli entity, and basically testing weapons and technology between them and the Israeli entity. Between Abu Dhabi and the Israeli entity, there's this tie directly when it comes to cybersecurity and weapons. Okay? And both have a hand basically in what's happening in Sudan. We'll come back to that later on. But moving forward, Saudi Arabia normalized ties under the table. Above the table, they haven't normalized ties. They're pushing for a two-state solution. But again, what's their problem with Hamas and the resistance? It's not only their complicity with the Israeli entity as GCC states or Arab states or part of the Organization of Islamic Countries. There are 14 Islamic countries across the world who actually do direct trading with the Israeli entity. So it's not only the GCC. Okay, and not all of the GCC. Kuwait refuses to normalize ties with the Israelis until today. So Saudi Arabia, they have something called the Public Investment Fund, and that
Yeah,
fund invests heavily in
yeah,
Jared
yeah,
Kushner's companies. Jared Kushner is the son-in-law of Donald
of
Trump.
Donald
He's
Trump.
also Israeli, and he's also
Yeah.
responsible for the real estate project of Gaza. So when they invest heavily in his companies that are real estate companies that has to do with Gaza, what does that mean? They're funding directly the Israeli entity to actually basically eliminate the Palestinians and the resistance. But why do they hate Hamas? It's because the GCC states look at Hamas as part of the Muslim Brotherhood, and they consider the Muslim Brotherhood a terrorist organization that wants to topple the regimes in the GCC. And that's why they never supported Hamas since day one. But what they did is basically they continued to send money to the PA, the Palestinian Authority, and Mahmoud Abbas, because he's weak and he's a yes man, and they can buy his vote anytime, and he can actually garner them what you call a Palestinian, carte blanche, white card that absolves them from their complicity in terms of supporting the Israeli entity. This is why they are against Hamas and they are pro-PA. They can buy the PA. They've been supporting the PA for the longest time with finances, but not because they like the Palestinians. It's because they keep them as a pressure card. That's it. And if they try to claim that they are humane, investing tens of billions of dollars in the Israeli entity and Israeli companies, while you send like few $1 million worth of food that you know that's not going to go into Gaza at any point, or when you basically airdrop, basically some of the trunks that were airdropped by the Emiratis had faulty parachutes that killed people. And it was during the time when we were calling for airdrop aid over Gaza, North Gaza at the time, when the Israelis had put North Gaza under total siege last year's January and February, and people were dying because of basically starvation. The Emiratis eventually came into supporting the Jordanians with airdrops, but they did faulty airdrops. The Americans did faulty airdrops. Everybody who came in afterwards did faulty airdrops to make people basically claim that we don't want airdrops, so that nobody would be able to get food at any point. And there were about 700,000 people at the time in North Gaza. Everybody was near starving, but the peripheries of Gaza, nobody was able to reach them except through airdrops. And Jordan was doing a great job until all these nations started coming over to show that they're humane in front of their constituency. And they started dropping the aid inside the sea. People drowned because of that. Or inside Israeli-controlled territories. They were shot by the Israeli occupation forces when they were trying to reach food. And at the same time, faulty parachutes that killed people.
Yeah, and it's good you brought up the name Jared Kushner because again, as an African, a lot of people don't know this that Jared Kushner is a good friend of a guy called the the current leader of the Israel Diamond Exchange, Dan Getler, who is exploiting Congo as we speak, and Jared Kushner as well is also a close confidant and friend of the founder of Blackwater, Eric Prince, who is also
True.
doing contracts in Congo. And you know that, and just one quick one. When Trump was in power during the first tenure, the 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 sister of Eric Prince, Bessie DeVos, was like education minister, and this was when I think it was Obama or who was in power. Then they put a lot of sanctions on Glencore, a company called Glencore, which was
I know
mining in
Glencore,
Congo.
yes.
Yeah, which was mining in Congo, which Dan Getler was somewhat connected to. So it was pressure from these individuals on Donald Trump that made them to lift sanctions on Glencore. So it is an interesting name. I mean, if you want to say something on it quickly, but I wanted to show you something
I
in
want to say
relation.
something while you're showing us. I want to say something about Eric Prince. So at Mina Uncensored, we were following Eric Prince since day one. We were bombarding him with emails along with his executives from Blackwater, which actually rebranded into Academy, and then basically the new company that he set, which is
It's
called
in Hong
R2.
Kong.
But he claims that he has nothing
Is
to
it
do
the
with it.
one based in? Is it the one based in Hong Kong
No,
that
no,
they claim?
okay, so the
Academy.
R2 is not, no. Academy is based in Abu Dhabi, and it's Blackwater. It rebranded into
Rebranded.
Academy in 2011, 2012. Basically, he moved to what you call, wait, 1 second. In 2010, Eric Prince moved to Abu Dhabi, and he rebranded Blackwater later on as Academy. And it had basically about 800 mercenaries training with a base in Abu Dhabi, and later on expanded. And those are the people who started getting mercenaries to take part in the wars in Africa, and in Libya especially, and in Sudan, and basically Djibouti and Eritrea with the fights over there, Somaliland. If you look at the whole map, I had basically published an article in 2017 called Safe Bases, the Emirati and Qatari Expansion in Africa. Okay, and it was in Arabic, but like I have the cover story, like the cover of it. I had posted it on Twitter, and we still have it until now, since 2017. All right, I had spoken about the military expansion of the UAE in Africa and the military expansion of Qatar in Africa. It's because the Emiratis and the Qataris hate each other, and they have some of them basically have ties with the Israelis. The expansion over there was inevitable. The Emiratis and the Saudis actually outsourced the Sudanese army at one point to fight in Yemen, When the Sudanese army decided to pull out of Yemen, they started attacking the Sudanese army, claiming it's Muslim Brotherhood. And that's when basically the RSF separated from the Sudanese army, which used to be part of the Sudanese army, and continued to fight against the Sudanese army and creating problems with Emirati weapons. And now the Emiratis basically claimed that we didn't send them new weapons. Those weapons were given to the Sudanese army, and the RSF took them from there. So at the end of the day, we found Israeli and Emirati made weapons with the RSF. The videos are there. Now, whatever they want to say or whatever narrative they want to run in the media and propaganda, they cannot absolve themselves from actually expanding in Africa and taking part in other people's wars. This is what you call deterioration and regression from the image of the United Arab Emirates that Sheikh Zayed, may his soul rest in peace, and Sheikh Rashid, may his soul rest in peace, had in mind when they established the United Arab Emirates unity, the federal government. They wanted to be an oasis of peace that brought people together through business, and they don't take part in other people's wars, but they actually support the truthful and rightful Arab causes. And I'll give you an example. In 1973, Sheikh Zayed, the president of the UAE, the father of the current president, Mohammed bin Zayed, he actually was one of the duo, him and King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, they actually signed an order to cut off oil, do an oil embargo on the world. This caused the 1973 oil embargo, oil crisis. They cut off oil from the rest of the world in support of the Palestinian cause. What was the result? King Faisal got assassinated, and Sheikh Zayed got threatened at that time. And then you go and see later on, during the 1982 Israeli invasion of Lebanon, what did Sheikh Zayed do? He gave an order allowing for Emiratis to go and do jihad in Lebanon against the Israelis. There were about 1,500 fighters who actually flew from Sharjah towards Damascus to come and basically support the Lebanese. But today, you see the whole bulk of his inheritors changing the whole narrative and standing with the Israelis against their Arab brothers and sisters. At the end of the day, it's a hypocrisy to continue to have an Arab League where nobody supports anybody, where petty grievances rule, where there's lack of trust, and they prefer to support a Zionist colonial European occupation of an Arab land and territory that has the third most holiest basically structure for Muslims in the world, which is basically the Al-Aqsa Mosque, rather than basically supporting the actual natives of the land who are Arabs. Most of them are Muslims and Christians like the rest of the Arab world, and who actually had nothing to do with this fight except being occupied. That doesn't make any sense. But at the end of the day, when you look at the whole game, those people are just capping on their petty grievances, lack of strategic vision, and their cowardice to claim that we cannot fight the Israelis because they're stronger. No. If you actually do collective power among each of you, you have spent trillions of dollars collectively on your weapons and air force, among other things. You allowed for the Americans to be within you. You can actually threaten the American bases at your land if you want to create pressure cards on the Americans to back off. But no, they didn't. You can create economic pressure by basically saying we're going to stop importing anything from any country that supports the Israeli entity. They didn't do that. In fact, they actually continue to invest in those countries.
Yeah, and give them a lot of money and normalize with them. And by the way, Egypt just did a gas deal with the biggest gas deal ever with Israel, worth over 30 billion. Egypt. And Egypt is supposed to be the pressure point. I warned earlier about this.
It's not only pressure point. This is crazy. Egypt does have offshore energy resources. Why doesn't Egypt basically invest in that? Egypt is actually replenishing the losses of the Israeli entity during this war. $34 billion giving it in one go to the Israeli entity doesn't make any sense, or even in installments. At the end of the day, Egypt, which used to be an exporter of gas, is now importing gas from the Israeli entity. Why? Because again, the ruler is accomplice in the crime that's happening. And at the end of the day, the Egyptians will wake up losing Sinai and eventually losing most of the parts of Egypt that the Israelis want for greater Israel.
They will go back to Sinai, and they've been saying this.
They will be taking it, yeah.
Yeah, they will go back to Sinai. And again, this is why the Arabs in the region are falling again to the Israelis over and over again and giving them enormous power because...
I want to say, sorry, shout out, because people are writing us nice stuff and some people are doing some arguments. And I feel like it's impolite not to address them, but thank you so much for those who are supporting us.
Yeah, go ahead and address the comments if you can see them.
No, it's like there's Sita, she's saying Leilah is the best, great Blackwater. Of course, it's now called Academy. We sent an email to Eric Prince, emails, and to R2 as well. And with the last email we had sent was on a Friday. On a Monday, Eric Prince basically speaks to the media on a sideline of a small, not conference, but meeting he had. And what happens? He says that he had given the Israeli government from day one plans on how to flood all of Gaza, to flood out the Hamas in the tunnels, and he has basically secured the funding for it. The only ones who can actually secure such a funding, like, or give such a funding, are the GCC states, and it's definitely either the UAE or Saudi Arabia or both of them. Just to let you know. So, like,
Yeah,
he actually said it after we had sent him the last email. Like, we published parts, like we scratched part of that email, but we published the emails that we sent Eric Prince. We asked him about his connection to Libya and his connection also to Sudan and other places. Like, he was outsourcing from Latin America as well, mercenaries, and we asked him about that. We asked him about the mercenaries that were funded by a certain GCC state to Gaza to fight from day one as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, there's something I wanted to bring to your attention, which I have loaded up. Let me show you. And this is in relation to the Boston Consulting Group. Is it a group you're familiar with? Now, something is important about this Boston Consulting
Oh,
Group that I'll
that's a
show
shell
you.
for the CIA.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my
And
God.
by the way, in the 70s, Netanyahu have worked for this group. A lot of people don't know he was a consultant in this group. You know, the guy
Because he
Netanyahu.
actually was Mossad who worked with CIA, and Boston Consulting Group is actually a shell for the CIA. There are 7 shell companies for the CIA that feed into what we call the GHF, the Gaza Holocaust Foundation.
Yeah, if you
GHF,
go
they call
down,
it military
if you
personnel.
if you look down, you see the connections in Angola, which is in 2020. They worked with Isabel dos Santos, who exploited Angola's natural resources, while the country suffers from poverty, illiteracy, and infant mortality. Then Gaza and the Humanitarian Foundation and the subsequent fallout with the Gaza Humanitarian Foundation, the GHF. And if you go down a bit again, involved with the Gaza redevelopment plan. This is the whole Trump, Rivera front and so on. And again with Saudi Arabia. So again, this is what I wanted to bring to your attention.
No,
The
but
Saudis.
forget Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is a client for Boston Consulting Group. The
Yeah,
actual thing that you have to look into
including Vision
are
2030,
basically
Sweden.
what did Boston Consulting Group do now? Boston Consulting Group is the architect for what you call GHF and also UG Solutions, which is a private military company, and SRS basically, which is Safe Reach Solutions. It's a CIA shell company that was founded by Philip Riley, and Philip Riley is a veteran CIA. Okay, he's known to be a veteran. He's a CIA veteran who started SRS Solutions. That what the architects of SRS Solutions and GHF is Boston Consulting Group. Now, Boston Consulting Group also basically not only provides communications for both, but also supports other shell companies. That includes what's the name of Two Ocean Trust. TOC, okay? So those companies are all tied together. Two Ocean Trust supports basically, gives the legal consultation to SRS, which gives the private military basically mercenaries to GHF. So all these companies that we're mentioning are shell companies that are established in the US, that are established by veteran CIA agents or partners of CIA agents that have been doing not only mercenary group, basic mercenary work on the ground, but also hide under the guise of what you call humanitarian or legal or communications, basically solutions to countries that the Americans have a vested interest in basically being there. So GHF is found in Gaza. What do? They kill Palestinians, continue to whitewash the American administration's basically face in front of the world that, oh, we're giving them millions of tons of food, which is a lie. And at the same time, they're trying to claim that there's no starvation in Gaza, but there is starvation in Gaza. And at the end of the day, when you look at the whole situation, the US administration in front of the constituency, oh, we gave them a humanitarian foundation that's giving them food. It's Hamas that's stealing the food or shooting at people, when in reality, it's the Gaza Holocaust Foundation, along with the private military companies, PMCs, like SRS and UG Solutions, whom they hired. Yeah, UG Solutions and SRS, they hired them to actually be the mercenaries on the ground who shoot at people at the Israeli command, just like basically Anthony Aguilar had not, he didn't expose them. He actually confirmed what we all have been saying for a long time. The Palestinians, since day one in February, when they got shot, sorry, not in February, in March, because February we exposed GHF when it was still being established. March and April and May, when they started basically going there and harming the Palestinians started speaking, and we were hosting them in our spaces, and they were saying that they were being shot at, including Dr. Aboud. I always give Dr. Aboud as an example. Dr. Aboud is one of the most, what you call, respectful people you can ever meet in your life. This person, he's a pacifist, and now he entered stage 5 starvation. That's irreversible. This person went over to the GHF to monitor what's happening and to try to get food to his family. And he saw how people got shot at. Eventually, basically, he left because he couldn't get food. I was the one who was translating for him in the space that we hosted from Arabic to English. He speaks fluent English, but he wanted to speak in Arabic. He was too tired to even think in English. And I was translating for him. And his words resonated in my mind because it was the hardest words that I would ever, basically, ever translate to anyone. When you have somebody who's telling you that I've entered stage 5 starvation and my family is basically hanging on the balance between stage 3 and stage 4, and they have nothing to eat. And then you have a bastard like Netanyahu comes out and says there's no starvation in Gaza.
Yeah. What is that? Like, even the US at some point admitted that there is starvation in Gaza to the extent where the US president decided to send some of his top envoys, Steve Witkoff, who is the US special envoy, and then Mike Huckabee, who once said before that the Palestinians don't exist, that is all a made up story, one
Of
of the
course.
radical, yeah, and so on and so sent them to Gaza because the US, oh, hang on, this is not a good look for us because if you're going to starve them, find a way to starve them so they don't die, on time and so on and so forth.
If you
So
allow me, and I'm sorry about that, but because I had written a whole thread, not thread, but basically a long post on Twitter, and I had pinned it on my Twitter account, Leila1H, Leila 1H. And that pinned tweet, I not only debunked the narrative by Netanyahu and GHF, but I also did the calculation. And I had spoken to doctors on the ground and dietitians who explained the difference between having food coming in, but not all of it is protein. So if it's a carb-rich, basically what you call diet, it leads to worse starvation and death eventually. And I explained it in points. He claimed that 1.3 million tons of aid came into Gaza. Okay, 1.3 million tons. So 1,300,000 tons of
yeah, for
food
those,
came.
yeah, just a second. For those listening, what is the Twitter stuff again? Spell
It's
it.
Leila, Leila, 1H for Hatoum or
Yeah.
hotel. Okay. So
Okay, I found it.
Lima Echo India, Lima Alpha, 1H. That's my account. And the pinned tweet, if you actually press on show more, it shows you the whole thing. Not all the 1.3 million tons of aid were food. Not all the food, because he claimed that they sent 1.3 million tons of aid
So this
from
is so this is
from
so this is
2023 until today. He claimed that for the past 2 years, people got enough food. So I was doing the calculation, but I was also giving the rationale behind it, okay? Not all the food that was sent was edible. We saw how some of it was rotten or not fit for human consumption. And some of that food was what you call animal feed, so animal fodder. And it actually ruins your brains and your system if you eat it, but still people ate it. But the Israeli occupation considered it part of food. Some of what got in was equipment and toys, plastic toys shaped like food. And Sister Sarah Wilkinson last year actually ran pictures of it and showed the hypocrisy of the Israelis. They would put in plastic shaped toys, food shaped toys that are made of plastic. And they would send them to Gaza and they would just register them as food aid, which is not food aid. And the children would look like, we can't eat that. They were biting on it, but it's not food, right? And the Israelis would allow for aid to come into Gaza through United Nations at one point. And once they are offloaded into what you call the warehouses and the cameras are off, they bombard them. We've seen it happen several times in North Gaza and Central Gaza, and even in the south. Now, the Israelis, what did they do as well? They allowed for aid trucks to come from Egypt. Most recently, they said 200 trucks. Most of them were empty. And the video footage actually showed that. Or Kogat, the Israeli occupation forces that were coordinating with the humanitarian agencies supposedly that got things in, they ordered the trucks to go to a certain location where the Israeli-backed Abu Shabab gangs were waiting and they stole the aid. And then there were the private sector trucks that came in. Those were not aid, but registered as aid. And those went directly to the merchants who deal with the Israelis, who offloaded them in their warehouses, and they kept them until there was a shortage in the market. And what did they do? They hiked the
Yes, sir.
prices. They control the prices, and not all the Palestinians have money.
Yes,
Like
sir.
if you
But
send
what?
Palestinians
Yeah,
$100, they will receive $40. In fact,
yeah,
because
yeah. Yes.
the exchange houses actually take a cut anywhere between 40 to 60%, sometimes 70%. So
Yeah,
they
but what
cannot
we
even
hear,
afford food.
yeah, what is the name of what is this group? Because what we hear is that Hamas is
Abu
the one
Shabab.
hijacked. Yeah, Abu Shabab. But and
Until
even in the
today, there's no
in the
proof that Hamas was stealing aid. Full stop. There's
yeah,
no material proof. Nothing.
yeah. So the Israelis are claiming this, and on the other hand, you have people in the Knesset testifying, live on camera, talking about Israeli support for some of these groups you mentioned, including Abu Shabab, and some of
Yeah.
them, the records of them stealing this aid, hijacking and hoarding this aid, and then selling it on the black market.
Exactly. So like it's all in collaboration, and the Israelis are making a killing out of it because the Israelis get their cut as well. So let's go to the calculations now, guys. Just focus with me on this one. This is very important. Let's assume that all the 1.3 million tons were food, okay, and assuming there are 2.2 million people in Gaza. Then, if you divide 1.3 million over 2.2 million, you have 590 kilos per person over a period of 21 months. That's 681 days. If you divide 580 kilos over 681 days, that means each person received 0.8 kilos per day, or what we're talking, if you divide it by 3 meals, each person in Gaza received 288 grams of food per meal. That's about 900 calories. Again, because I spoke to dietitians and they did the calculations and they gave me the numbers. You can go do it yourself. It's up to you. So 900 calories per meal, that's amazing. Supposedly people will survive on that. There will be no starvation. But most of the food that went into Gaza was deficient in protein. There was no protein. It was carb rich. So like it's mainly flour, spaghetti, or basically what you call pasta, and rice. All right. What happens to you when there is no protein or little protein and no vegetables, no perishables, no proper fruits as well? Okay. What happens in the short term? That's according to doctors. Short term, we're saying weeks to months. There will be muscle breakdown. I'm reading it from, so I wouldn't miss anything. Okay.
Yeah.
There will be muscle breakdown. The body starts breaking down muscle tissue to get amino acids it needs for survival. Then you have fatigue and weakness. Lack of protein leads to poor muscle repair, weakness, and lethargy. And then you have hair loss, brittle nails, dry skin, structural proteins like keratin, you start suffering from their loss. In the medium term, we're talking about months to 1 year, okay? You have your immune system collapsing. You have edema, which is swelling because your blood basically will be circulating with fluids retained in certain areas. That's why you have people like with a big belly, it's retained fluid, okay? That's not people basically being fat. It's because of edema. And then you have slow wound healing because the collagen synthesis is impaired in your body. And then you have mental and cognitive decline, and your nervous system basically starts shutting down. And on the long term, 1 year to 2 years, which is now happening now, and this is what you're going to see, you have severe muscle wasting, organ failure, especially liver and kidneys. And then you have marasmus. It's a form of severe protein energy malnutrition and death if not corrected, or prolonged protein deficiency happens, then it's reversible and then you die. So most of that aid was rich in carbs, which is flour, rice, and pasta, and low on protein. And this is what the Israelis were planning for the longest time. They have their dietitians, they have their scientists, they were planning it, right? And this means I had basically the second part. It's a two-tweet. It says, I said, in short, a 900-calorie meal per 3 times a day for 2 years that is rich in carbs and low in protein and not diversified, like we are seeing happening in Gaza, leads to severe malnourishment, muscle loss, organ damage, immune system malfunction, and a serious risk of permanent disability leading to death. And this is what we're seeing now. So they have planned it to be in phases until people start dropping and dying, but they will continue to claim, oh, we got them 1.3 million tons of food that got into Gaza over the past 2 years. But if you actually don't know what kind of food got in, you will think that the
Yeah.
Israelis have right, but it's not true. And before that, before October 2023, this is very important for people to know, because I ran a whole article from my reporter on the ground in Gaza. His name is Sami Abu Salem. When I was his editor at Newsweek Middle East back in 2016, that article spoke about how the Israelis were doing the calorie count. Sorry, 2015, how they were doing the calorie count in Gaza. Since 2008, until we ran that article, the Israelis were getting into Gaza only 500 trucks per day, which is near what the Palestinians needed to survive. And eventually, by October 2023, according to the Red Cross, the ICRC, the International Committee for Red Cross, they have a report, and WHO, nearly half of the population of Gaza was anemic because of the kind of things that the Israelis wouldn't allow to go into Gaza. They banned coriander from getting into Gaza for some reason. Nobody knows why. So that calorie count diet that they put Gaza on with 500 trucks per day actually caused an anemic population that got severely impacted by the current starvation that has been ongoing for the past 2 years. And this is why the Israelis have been planning it for the longest time. They want to eliminate the Palestinians. They don't want a Palestinian to continue to survive so that they don't have a resistance in the future. They are weakening them. Their energy is drained, and now nobody can raise their head to go and fight anymore. This is what's happening in Gaza.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I love your insight on this, but the Israelis are saying, on the other hand, that oh, it's all a lie. We said they are sending food in, and that there are thousands of trucks stuck outside. The UN is refusing to take the food, and that they show images of some Palestinians that are maybe fat or overweight. They say, oh, they are eating too much food, and so on and so forth, and that the pictures we saw of those children are actually those with maybe genetic disorder, and some of them are actually videos from elsewhere. That the whole world
He ran
is
a report about a woman who basically passed away, and basically he said like they're lying. She didn't pass away from starvation. She had a what you call chronic disease. The woman had cancer, but she was also starving, and that aggravated her situation. That's why she passed away. She was killed by the Israeli starvation method. I mean, with 500 trucks per day, it wasn't enough for people to survive. Now you have like 50 trucks, one truck, 200 trucks, and this is what they're claiming is entering, but it's not entering Gaza. It's a lie. Then that tells you a lot. Gaza at the moment, and I keep repeating it, according to the doctors I spoke with, to reverse starvation, we need at least 1,500 trucks of aid coming in on daily basis that has all like diversified food, perishables, fruits and vegetables, protein, a lot of protein, vitamins, supplements, and basically carbs as well, so that people can reverse part of the starvation. At the moment, we have 20% of the Gaza population that entered stage 5. If you don't fix that, stage 5 is irreversible starvation. Do you
so
have it
even
on
if
your, like, will you allow it on your conscience to have 20% of 2 million? I mean, like, that's 400,000 people that will be perished because you cannot allow aid in. 400,000 people in one go. Seriously, like, what is the world waiting to actually wake up?
yeah, so basically you're saying even if the Israelis stop shooting today, that if that some of them will still that the damage that have been done, most of it is irreversible. So it's a systematic campaign of starvation, and everything they're doing is planned and is by design. That's what you're
And they're
saying.
wasting your time with the ceasefire, so you can actually continue to waste time and nobody looks elsewhere where basically people understand that there's an actual starvation and people are going to die eventually, and they already started dying. So that at the end of the day, they prolong with the ceasefire. Netanyahu doesn't want ceasefire. Even if he agrees to a ceasefire, he will never respect it like we saw in the past 2 ceasefire rounds that we saw. And at the same time, he will continue to shoot and assassinate Palestinians, no matter what. He will never stop. Since when did the Israelis actually, what you call, respect an agreement that they signed?
Yeah, clearly they don't care about the agreement. In fact, in recent information that we got is that Hamas have agreed to the details of the system, even though it's against their own interest. And now the Israelis are saying, well, we think about it, or we don't want that agreement anymore. That draft was by the Israelis. This was their proposal. The Americans took it to, I think, the Egyptians or the Qataris, and Hamas have signed up to that agreement or agreed to it, to most part of the details of the agreement. And the Israelis are saying, no, we want to proceed with the complete annexation of Gaza City and the expulsion of over 700,000 or 800,000 Palestinians from Gaza City. And what would that entail? Would that entail the death of tens of thousands of Palestinians while they are doing that? I mean, the Israelis don't have a good track record of doing this, but I want to know your opinion on this as well.
Good and Israelis don't go well in the same sentence. They don't have a track record, full stop.
Yeah, they don't have a track record. Exactly. And
Somebody's saying that the Israelis even mix drugs inside the flour. This is true. And by the way, aside from the flour from the drug pills, they actually had it crushed so it's in powder. So the Israelis, the Palestinians, I mean, like they have to do a leap of faith in terms of what they're eating that's coming through the Israelis. Again, it's really crazy. Ceasefire, even if they agree to it, it will lead to nothing. I mean, at the end of the day, everybody is standing against the resistance over there, including the Qataris and the Egyptians, who are the mediators.
Yeah.
They
So that
are the facilitators. Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So that takes me to my next question as we're rounding up this conversation. This has been an interesting conversation. Please do well to follow her. Her YouTube will be on shortly. We'll be having these conversations regularly. In fact, I will have to discuss with her, on how many times we can do this a week. Her YouTube will be up as well. We'll be co-hosting on issues as they come up in relations to Middle East and North
Hopefully, we
Africa.
will have our YouTube channel basically up and running by next week, because I think most of my followers and listeners from Twitter, they know that the YouTube actually deleted our channel, which had 148 videos on it that exposed Israeli war crimes being committed over the past 2 years, including basically videos that we were raising awareness against what the Israelis were doing on the ground, and the what you call the background of this fight and the details. So eventually they deleted our YouTube channel, despite the fact that our coverage was equivalent to international media, because I worked with international media, so I know which words to use and which words not to use. But what they were afraid of is basically us exposing the next phase of the war and what the Israelis were doing, because of the context, the strong context we have on the ground. And they didn't like that. Other people are allowed to actually go and cuss at the Israelis in YouTube channels, and nobody deletes those channels. And there's a big question mark. But then again, we found out that we were flagged. Like NY Played, for example, one of our team members at Mina Uncensored, his account on Twitter got suspended because he exposed where Netanyahu was hiding during the Iranian bombardment of basically the Israeli entity. He was hiding under Al-Aqsa Mosque, the same place, the tunnel that Netanyahu was showing 2 weeks before the bombardment started. So at the end of the day, once he did that, the IOF flagged his account to Twitter, and Twitter wouldn't even basically reconsider an appeal. He's suspended indefinitely after that.
Yeah, but the thing, Leila, when did this happen? Because I remember last year, African Stream also being taken down. This was after a statement from the Secretary of State, Anthony Blinken, saying that this is an anti-Israeli propaganda and some of them are Russian propagandists. And they took down a lot of accounts as a result of that statement. YouTube in
Yeah,
particular.
a lot of accounts that don't belong to them or don't pose as if they are against the Israelis, but they are under the table, so justifying for the Israelis. Our account doesn't play. Like we say it as it is, black and white, and we expose them. They cannot buy us. I mean, we're making ends meet, like with $200, $300 at the end of the month from freelancing here and there, translating papers, so that nobody can actually control us with funding. I'm okay with the lowest amount of money I can do from my own freelance work, so long that nobody can tell me how I can cover things and what I say. And this is why I have the ability to say what I can say without having a direct boss above me or a government basically imposing an agenda on me. And this is what scares them.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so guys, her account is going to be up latest next week, and we'll be doing more of this. For me, I'm just, you can call me
The
I'm the one, I'm
facilitator.
the facilitator, basically. I just ask questions and sit back. It's yeah, and I enjoy doing this because I learn a lot, from your
We need to
exposition.
do a space on Africa, by the way. And I will bring my
Yeah, yeah.
Sudanese friends as well. You'll love it.
Yeah, we will. And by the way, I was also thinking this. I have a contact in Mali, which I'm trying to reach out to, and this person actually speaks French.
Oh,
Yeah, you will like this. All I have to do is just to sit back and you guys can talk it out. So he's an expert in Sahelian politics, and he's a correspondent for the G5 Sahel and no, not for not. He worked for the G5 Sahel, but he's a correspondent for France 24, who is a
okay.
guy I met through another contact in Mali. His name is Dr. Ali Tonkara. I hope I'm able to get him
Oh,
across. You would love to talk to him.
I would
He's
love to
very
talk to him about what happened to Mali since 2013, because I did
you
cover the terrorist gangs attacks in Mali in 2013 for the Wall Street Journal.
oh
So it would be interesting to actually follow up on that, because that was the
yeah.
beginning of Al Qaeda ISIS expansion in
This
Sahel
was
states.
yeah, this is when Ahmed Aya Sanogo, the captain, took over power, and this was when Mujao and Jenin Al Morabitun and some of these groups that came in with the Tuareg overran the government position in Gao, Kidal, and Timbuktu. Yes, 2013. And by the way,
So
the
I
French
will be
came.
the only white person. No, I'm not white. I'm Mediterranean. I'm actually
Yeah,
I'm Semitic Mediterranean. So like I will
hmm
be the only basically
yeah, on
non-African
the
on the panel.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So as we wrap up the conversation, guys, like I said, don't forget to like and engage with this video. It's very important. If you have questions that you want Leila to address in our next conversation, leave it in the comment section. I'm going to be reviewing your comment and passing them across to her. So for the next meeting that we're going to have, we'll set the modalities for this, and we'll be doing this regularly as well. And also feel free to reach out to Mina. She is like I said, I showed her X account. She's on X. She hosts spaces there, and she's doing a lot of stuff as well in the region. So feel free to reach out to her if you have any sort of collaboration you want to do with her.
Can
And
I do an
collabor-
appeal? Can I do
yeah,
an appeal?
and collaboration in the sense of supporting her. It's not just reaching out to her
No,
because
not for
all.
finances. Look,
Okay.
for the past 2 years, we never asked for money because we wanted to be that independent. But independent journalism cannot last for long, just basically
Yeah.
on scraps, right? I'm not going to ask you for money or anything, but I just opened my TikTok account about 11 days ago. And it's Leilah1 H1 because somebody else took Leilah1 H, which is really sad. But anyway, if you can follow me on TikTok, because I need apparently 1,000 followers because I'm in a certain region that needs 1,000 followers to be able to open my camera and have TikTok
Don't,
live as well, where
don't
you
worry
and I
about.
can talk together over there, by the
Don't,
way. I'm
with
coming for
TikTok
you. I'm coming for
with, Tik-
you.
with TikTok, don't worry about that. I can get you to 1,000 in 2 days. You should
I
have.
don't
I
want to
mean, if
buy
you have.
followers, by the way. I
No,
don't
no,
want to
you're
buy
not bad.
followers
No, 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 no,
organically.
no,
Yeah,
no, no, no. I'm just going to go live and just tag you and tell people to follow you, and you can do that in no
inshallah.
time. In no
Thank you.
time. So that's not a problem at all. And by the way, in relations to that, before we bring the conversation to a close, I want to ask you a few questions again. What is the role of China in the region?
um, all right. So China is the what you call the person behind the curtains who actually sells weapons to everybody and is friends with everyone, but is not friends with anyone. Okay, so this is what China did in Darfur back in 2006, 2007. They were supporting with weapons under the table both warring parties, and once that war subsided at one point in time, they were the first to take in what you call the energy and water excavation contracts in Darfur and Nyala. That was in 2006 again. Like it started in 2005. It's been ongoing until now, but like there were in between phases. When it comes to, for example, Palestine, the Chinese eventually came out this year saying, oh, this war must end, there shouldn't be a genocide, blah, blah, blah. But one of the main trade partners with the Israeli entity is China. A Chinese company that has direct ties with the Chinese government runs the port of Haifa, as I said in the beginning of this interview. And towards the end, basically, the port of Haifa was bought by the Indians, but it's run by a Chinese company. The Chinese, at the same time, have extended their economic ties across the region. They're trying to secure their Silk Road, but also they want to try to what you call secure a position in the trade corridor that extends from India towards what you call Europe. Again, anybody who controls the trade to Europe controls European decision making as much as anyone who controls the energy pipelines towards Europe controls the the European decision making process. That's why the Americans attacked Russians Nord Stream 1 and Nord Stream 2 pipelines. And they basically, the Russians used to supply near free gas to the Europeans. Like it was cheap prices for them. The Americans replaced the Russian contracts with American contracts at high cost. And now with them, the Americans controlling what comes from east to Europe, when it comes to energy, they will suffocate the Europeans. That's why the Europeans are trying to fight for survival in Africa. But the Russians understood the game very well, and they started clipping their wings through Wagner Group for basically what you call the past 4 years exactly. And the Chinese, they have a vested interest in Africa in terms of the minerals, resources, and raw material that the Chinese need for their industry. And the Chinese have expanded and fanned out across all of Africa, nearly all of Africa, mainly in Angola, where they did the infrastructure, among other countries. And they will be fighting or basically facing off the Americans in Africa as well in other places, because the Americans are trying to secure also power grabs in Africa to control the Europeans as well. So at the end of the day, the Chinese are the biggest strategists of them all. They fight with everyone, like they have everyone fight against one another, and then they come in and they basically supply weapons to everyone, and they take all the contracts that they need. They are friends with everyone through economy, but they are friend to nobody.
Yeah, politically, they don't really like, even with
I
the
don't
whole,
I don't
even
trust
with,
them,
yeah.
but I prefer to have the Chinese basically expanding economically rather than the military bases and the type of hegemony that the Americans and the Israelis try to impose on everybody, or the newly rich attitude of some Arab states.
And this is the same question I get about in Africa when people ask me as an African, don't you see what the Chinese are doing, building all these ports and this railway? And do you think they are all for Africa? You think they care about you? Hang on a second. The Chinese are also pursuing their interests in Africa. I know that, as a matter of fact. But the Chinese are not dictating to us what sort of system to have, who will be the president. So they're not interfering in our politics, but they are building infrastructure, which they are also trying to leverage on that for their own economic benefit because of the market, because of access to raw materials, which the Americans are looking for, by the way. But the Americans, in order to get the resources, will bomb, we
Pew, pew,
destroy.
pew.
We come in the name of democracy. We tell you about human rights and our civil liberties and all these ideas, that are so fanciful in the air. And anytime we hear of democracy, I think of Libya, I think of Chad, I think of what they're doing in Sudan, and so on and so forth. So for us, we rather deal with the Chinese because we know clearly that they want the economy, but they're doing that on the basis of mutual respect. We in Africa have these resources. We don't really have the technological know-how to process them. So we need partnership, but that partnership should be on the basis of mutual respect and not bombs from the sky. Yeah,
No,
so I know
definitely.
that.
There's somebody who had put a comment saying F Bahrain, Kuwait, Oman, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates. I want to make a disclaimer over here that the GCC Council, which has all the Gulf Cooperation Council states that have all these states that you just mentioned and you cursed upon, Kuwait is the only Arab country and the only GCC country that continues to refuse totally to normalize ties with the Israelis. They don't even allow Israelis with a second passport to fly on their planes. And they are the only ones who were sending to Gaza what Gaza really needed. They were the ones who sent new ambulances. They were the ones who sent what you call refrigerators that work on solar power because they knew that the Israelis are going to cut off fuel. They are the ones who actually sent doctors on the ground, and they are the ones who had the doctors refusing to leave until the last minute. So at the end of the day, I would exclude Kuwait from this effing thing. The rest you can go and custom as you please because they are all complicit. And I don't care. I lived there for 15 years. I have the best of friends on the ground. People are one thing, but the governments is a different thing. So if you're cussing the governments, that's fine. People on the ground are totally different than what you hear in the media. And when it comes to you effing those, I suggest that you also F the rest of the 56, what you call countries in the Organization of Islamic Countries.
Including Nigeria, by the way, the Israeli companies
Yeah,
here.
Nigeria sends them energy until today.
Israeli, yeah, Israeli companies here doing contracts for the government of Nigeria, working on oil pipelines. Some of their construction companies, it's insane. And Nigeria is also
You
a member of
directly
the IOC.
export energy to the Israeli entity. But you know what's the sad part? The Organization of Islamic Countries has 57 states. Only one state fought against the Israelis. The rest of the states didn't. And that state is the Iranians, and because of their vested interest in the region, right? And the second country that didn't fight, but they continue to do boycott all the time to the Israelis is Kuwait. So out of 57 states, it's actually 55 states that you need to cuss, of which 14 do direct trade with the Israelis. The rest do basically trade underneath the table through a third party. And they think that basically they're lying to themselves and the world that they're not tying hands or shaking hands with the Israelis. It's so sad.
Yeah, and Iranians are the only ones to have lifted a finger against Israel. And some will say, well, they're doing it for their own interests. At least they put some pressure on Israel. Now, I don't think we have enough time to take on this. Maybe in our next meeting, we can talk about Sudan and Yemen, and also
And
Israel's
Chad
endgame.
and Burkina Faso and the Sahel
Yeah,
states, the Horn of
yes.
Africa. Somaliland is very important. Somalia, I mean, divided into three countries, and Somaliland basically being the cut of the Emiratis and the Israelis. That's something that we need to talk about next time.
Yeah, absolutely. Guys, like I said, she will get on YouTube. We'll try to figure out for her to get back on YouTube again. And we'll be doing this more often than not. She is on X. She's going to be on TikTok. And after the stream, I don't know whether you have time. We might also go on TikTok. So because this is where you also, you need, to stay on the eye and have these conversations regularly as well to be able to funnel followers from there to other platforms that you need. And yeah, so this is the beginning of the journey, guys. Like I said, the most important thing for you guys to do is to engage with this video, share this video, and as soon as it goes live on YouTube, we will be doing this more often than not, and you guys will follow her as well. If you really enjoy this, guys, we will. And I'm going to put out short videos out there to give you guys a timeline. We might be doing this twice in a week, if possible, on this platform. And thank you so much, Leila, for coming. Once or
Twice.
twice, once or twice. It
No
depends
worries,
on.
no worries.
Yeah, yeah,
I mean,
once or
because like
twice.
we're having problems along our eastern borders with the Syrian terrorists over there from the Julani side, and then we have the Israelis basically bombarding us on the southern front. So I have to just jump between fronts every now and then. So I don't know how much time I have, except like once a week, and I can actually surely make it. Second time,
Yeah.
maybe we do it on TikTok while I'm basically driving.
No problem. No, absolutely no problem for me. We will talk about that so that we can have a consistent, review of weekly events, and add and connect that with the geopolitical dynamics in the region as often as possible, mostly Middle East and Africa, and what is happening in the center in the United States and how that also translates to actions on the ground around the world. Thank you so much. And by the way, don't forget the next one. We will be talking a lot about Africa, particularly Sudan and the Sahel. Thank you so much. I'll see you soon. See you. Hopefully, we can do something on TikTok if you have
Inshallah.
time. Yeah.
Okay,
Take
will
care.
do.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
Yeah. You too. Yeah.